Welcome to this special hearing of the Los Angeles County Sheriff Civilian Oversight Commission. We're going to have a hearing on alleged deputy gangs, but before we begin, I think we need to take the roll. Here.
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 Mr. Garcia.
Here.
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 Commissioner Hicks. Present. Commissioner Mead.
Yes, here.
Thank you. So before we begin, I just wanted to make brief opening remarks. For decades, there have been allegations from many different quarters that deputy gangs exist within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Several prior commissions have voiced concerns about the department's gang culture and urged each elected sheriff to act swiftly to eradicate deputy gangs or cliques. Unfortunately, sheriff leadership has refused to investigate, even though allegations about deputy gangs have hurt the relationship between the department and the communities it is supposed to serve. Consequently, last November, the COC voted unanimously to conduct a full-scale independent investigation whether there are deputy gangs right now within the department. Today is this commission's first special hearing on the matter. The hearing will be conducted by our able special counsel, Bert Deixler, and his team of highly skilled lawyers, all of whom have donated their time and expertise to help us investigate the matter of alleged deputy gangs. So, Bert, I'm going to turn it over to you to make some opening remarks.
I'll begin by saying good morning, commissioners. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. Before I begin, I want to ensure that the lawyers who have participated are known to the commission. I have with me today Lauren Wertheimer of the Vedder Price firm, Ellen Choi of the firm Covington and Burling, and Trent Fuji of the Vedder Price firm, and my colleague Patricia Perello, who will be keeping me sane here by making sure the exhibits come up as I had hoped. With your permission, I'd like to give a kind of procedural opening statement and reserve the opportunity to give a substantive opening statement, perhaps to another time. The many lawyers who have been engaged to gather information for the commission have interviewed several dozen percipient witnesses, with dozens more to go. We've been struck thus far by a number of things. First, the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is an organization of professionals who are mostly heroes. As you'll hear, these are people who have volunteered and are committed to community safety at personal risk. Our admiration for them, for the many we've met, is genuine, and our gratitude for their service is real. But within this organization, we found a palpable fear, a fear of professional retribution. Career suicide is the term we've heard repeatedly, and perhaps more troubling, a fear for physical safety if one is associated and revealed as cooperating in this investigation. Because so many department members have families who serve in the organization, spouses, children, siblings, the fear of retribution is not limited to the career of the individual with whom we have spoken, but to those near and dear to that witness as well. You will see today written evidence of fear expressed by a department member tasked simply with providing objective information from a data set to a superior. Also, we'll have a current department member testify anonymously for fear of retaliation. That examination will seek to avoid identifying details and we will ask the commissioners, should any wish to ask questions, to do so in a fashion that will not assist identification of the witness who, as I say, fears retribution. I should add that a critical witness scheduled to testify today anonymously withdrew Saturday out of fear of retaliation. And another scheduled witness had a surprise call to duty today, rendering that witness unavailable, perhaps a scheduling coincidence. Our investigation has been hampered by the action and inaction of County Council, which has insisted upon marking and retaining as confidential dozens of depositions taken in pending litigation against the county and department members. Mind you, of course, the content of each deposition is known both to the plaintiffs in the case, to their lawyers, as well as the numbers of outside counsel representing the county and the individual department members. The material is not secret. I've been offered the opportunity to review certain depositions. The review, however, was conditioned upon my agreeing not to share the content of the depositions with you, the commission charged with investigating the existence of deputy gangs or cliques. Indeed, I'd be barred from sharing the materials, even with the many top-tier, prominent, and experienced lawyers participating in this investigation pro bono. I hope it's not surprising that I've rejected this proposal from County Council. Finally, if time permits, we intend to question a former LASD chief who has specific, relevant information about an issue to be discussed today. The witness is a candidate for sheriff. In calling the witness, we offer no endorsement of his candidacy. No endorsement should be inferred. We have interviewed several other candidates for sheriff. We intend to interview more. Each has offered suggestions about the existence of and solutions regarding deputy gangs. Each has offered to testify, and likely each will be invited to do so at a later meeting. We contemplate calling only one candidate today, only because of the ordering of the proof and not for any political purpose. Fairness dictates that I reveal that the only candidate who has thus far refused to meet either informally or to testify at today's hearing is Sheriff Villanueva. I'm told that he has sent a lieutenant who serves directly in his office to monitor the proceedings. We intend, with the commission's permission, to invite Sheriff Villanueva to testify at a later hearing, voluntarily or under compulsion. With that predicate, we're ready to call our first witness, if that's how the commission would like to proceed.
Yes.
Max Huntsman, please. You sworn?
Yes. Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Morning, sir. Would you state and spell your last name?
Huntsman, Huntsman.
And Mr. Huntsman, how are you employed?
I work for the County of Los Angeles as the Inspector General.
And prior to your role as Inspector General, how long have you been involved in law enforcement?
Since 1991, when I graduated from law school and became senior law clerk for the District Attorney's Office.
And where'd you go to law school?
Yale Law School.
In your role as Inspector General, have you had a focus in the area of deputy cliques or deputy gangs?
We have been investigating them actively almost our entire existence as an office.
To your knowledge, is the issue of deputy gangs or cliques a recently discovered problem in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department?
Absolutely not.
Let me ask you to look in the book. I hope the exhibit book is there for Exhibit 1, which I'll ask be placed on the board.
Right. Yes. Exhibit 1.
And is it
Got it.
Exhibit 1 a document that you caused to be prepared?
It is.
And let me ask you first about the footnote on page numbered 1. Take a look at that.
Yes.
An internal LASD memo dated December 5th, 1973, documented an investigation of a group called the Little Devils. The Little Devils employed a sequentially numbered tattoo of a devil on the left calf. And it goes on to say it identified at least 38 of them by name. Was it part of your research and background to determine that there had been deputy gangs or cliques in the LA Sheriff's Department, at least as of 1973?
1971, I believe, according to that memo.
And the number of identified members was what?
I believe at that time they identified 47 members of the Red Devils. And of course, subsequently, they have identified members of other potential law enforcement gangs.
On the first page at the very top, you make reference to Special Counsel James G. Colts in 1992. Who was Judge Colts?
Judge Colts, at the time of that report, was a retired judge who had served many years as a prosecutor, many years as a judge, and he was brought forward to do an in-depth analysis of LASD, not unlike subsequent ones, partly because he was a Republican and a staunch law enforcement judge.
And what was the subject of his report?
It was professionalism in LASD, for want of a better term.
And what in substance did he conclude on the subject matter of deputy gangs in the Sheriff's Department?
In his final report, there were a half dozen pages on the subject detailing testimony that he had received in anonymous ways, similar to the way Rand operated. And he concluded in a recommendation that the Sheriff's Department should actively, as you described in your opening statement, root out these groups, create policies to prevent them, and actively investigate to remove this influence from the Sheriff's Department.
And would you take a look, please, at exhibit numbered 2, which is a September 13th, 2004 memo to Sheriff Baca from William Stonich.
No, 2 begins with a memo from Commander Miller, and then attached to it several pages in is the memo you refer to.
Yes, I'd like you to refer to that portion of exhibit numbered 2. And what in substance was Under Sheriff Stonich writing about to then Sheriff Baca in 2004?
He was writing about a situation very similar to what has been alleged since in East Los Angeles, but in this case, he was talking about Century Station, which appeared to have at least 2 groups that were gang-like in the way they operated, and he described them in that memo and recommended action to respond to the problem.
On the second page of that 2004 memo, there's reference to the Mexican Mafia. You see that reference, sir?
Yes, that was the name they used to describe one of the groups.
And how did Under Sheriff Stonich identify the positions of influence within the Century Station occupied by the Mexican Mafia gang at that time?
He identified them as detective, scheduling, watch deputy, and field training officer positions.
And what was the conduct that was identified as unethical activity in 2004 by this deputy gang?
As I say, it was very similar to what has been alleged in East Los Angeles and focused primarily upon the use of gang membership in order to influence benefits to employees within the station, scheduling, overtime, opportunities for advancement, whether or not somebody would be encouraged, if you will, to leave the station, things like that. And there was a gang-like elements to it.
If you turn your attention to the next page, there's another gang identified called the Regulator. Do you see that?
I do.
And do the Regulators have a means of identifying themselves to others and themselves?
Yes, the Regulators use a tattoo which emulates the historical Regulators, a cowboy outlaws gang, and has a skeleton, but there's a trench coat and a tattoo, and guns that are sometimes have smoke coming from them, depending.
In the fourth bullet point, there's reference to a Angel James, who is described as a shot caller. Do you see that reference?
I do.
And what is the position of shot caller an officially sanctioned position within the LA Sheriff's Department?
It is not.
In connection with the work you've done as Inspector General, have you come upon sheriff's deputies identified as shot callers?
Yes.
At what station, sir?
East Los Angeles, Century, and Compton.
Your October 2020 report refers to a report by the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence. What was that group?
That was a group put in place in response to, again, allegations of unprofessionalism and rampant violence by deputies, in particular in the jails, that came to light after what we're talking about here. And there were a number of responses, but the county's response was to create the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence to do a deep dive, not unlike what's happening today.
And did the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence identify groups or of deputy cliques or deputy gangs?
They did. And similarly, they made recommendations about how to deal with them.
And where were those gangs located?
I don't recall all the locations they identified, but I believe they were primarily they were focusing on custody operations. So they had the 2,000 and 3,000 boys, which were in custody. But I believe they also made reference to other groups that by then were known, such as, I believe they mentioned the Banditos, but by that time they were present in a number of different stations outside of custody.
And in connection with the 2,000 and 3,000 group boys, did they identify shot callers?
Yes.
In your work,
By saying identify, I mean that they concluded that they did exist. They did not name names.
in your work as an Inspector General, has it come to your attention that any shot caller was a woman?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any shot caller being a woman within one of the gangs. I am aware of an allegation that the Banditos had an affiliate who was a shot caller who was a woman, but she was not a member of the Banditos because I'm not aware of any female ever being a member of the Banditos.
Has your work as Inspector General led you to the belief that any shot caller was ever African American?
Not to my knowledge.
Let me ensure that when we use the word going forward of deputy gang, that we have an agreed term. Exhibit 3 is a copy of Penal Code Section 13670.
Yes,
And you're familiar with that penal code?
I am.
A law enforcement gang is defined as a group of peace officers who identify by a name and may be identified by matching tattoos and who engage in a pattern of on-duty behavior that intentionally violates the law or fundamental principles of professional policing. You're familiar with that portion of the penal code, sir?
I am.
Is there any question in your mind, based upon the description of the deputy groups, the Mexican Mafia and the Regulators that we've learned about here, that each was a deputy gang within the definition of the penal code?
As described in the memo, certainly. As to the Regulators, I am aware of additional information that I have acquired since then. And as to both of those groups, they are indeed, they do meet this criteria.
And why do they meet that criteria?
Well, for a bunch of reasons that I would take all day to go through, but there are multiple conditions in here that list the conduct that if you engage in it, you are a law enforcement gang, and they meet multiple ones of those.
So let's examine a few of them within this section of the penal code. The penal code goes on to describe indicia of deputy gangs to include excluding, harassing, or discriminating against any individual based on a protected category under federal or state anti-discrimination law.
Correct.
So, for example, if a woman could not be a member of one of these deputy gangs, would that be sufficient to constitute a violation of 13670?
I believe so, yes.
If an African American couldn't be a member of such a gang, would that be a violation of 13670?
I believe so, yes.
The penal code section goes on to require maintaining a policy that prohibits participation in a law enforcement gang and makes a violation of the policy grounds for termination. Has it come to your attention that the sheriff has terminated any employee because he was a member of a deputy gang?
It is my specific understanding that he has not.
The Penal Code goes on to impose an obligation of a law enforcement agent to, quote, cooperate in any investigation into these gangs by an inspector general, the attorney general, or any other authorized agency. Do you understand cooperation to include the obligation to provide requested documents?
I do.
Do you understand the obligation to include the provision of related information to you as Inspector General?
I do.
Let me turn your attention to an incident at Kennedy Hall on September 28th, 2018. Would you briefly describe what the event consisted of?
The Kennedy Hall event was an after-work party of East LA deputies in which a lot of alcohol was consumed and people were celebrating. During that party, a group of deputies who were allegedly banditos began to verbally harass a smaller group of other deputies and eventually assaulted them. One of the alleged banditos started the assault and three others joined in.
Do you know the names of the alleged perpetrators?
Well, my memory is not perfect, so it would help me to refresh, but I believe Rodriguez, I should check my notes. Is that all right?
Why don't you check your notes and see if that'll refresh your memory?
Thank you. May I read from my notes, or would you like me to see if my memory is
Well,
refreshed?
if it refreshes your memory, you don't need to read from them. If it doesn't, then you can read it as past recollection recorded.
Well, I'll read them as past recollection recorded just to be sure. Gregory Rodriguez, Rafael Munoz, David Silverio, and Michael Hernandez.
And because it may come into play as we look at some other documents, did Rafael Munoz have a nickname?
Big Listo.
And what about Gregory Rodriguez? Did he have a nickname?
He did. G-Rod
What about David Silverio? Did he have a nickname?
did. His nickname was Bam Bam.
David Silverio's nickname was Silver, wasn't it, sir?
I've heard that said.
Okay. And Michael Hernandez, his nickname was Bam Bam.
Correct.
Do you know whether a civil lawsuit has been brought against those individuals in the county of Los Angeles?
Yes, it has.
And that's been brought by a private attorney, Vincent Miller, and the ACLU?
Correct.
And do the allegations in the complaint include, among other things, assertions of retaliation, workplace harassment, discrimination, and violation of state and federal civil rights laws?
They do.
Do the complaints does the complaint include allegations regarding injuries that give rise to a possible finding of great bodily injury, as that term is defined under the Penal Code?
Not only does the lawsuit, but the internal investigation of the Sheriff's Department supports that conclusion.
And would it be a correct summary to say that the lawsuit relates to a group known as the Banditos?
It would.
How large is the Bandito group reported to be?
It is reported to be well over 50, and it has been reported that it may have topped out at 100 for procedural reasons, but it certainly is over 50.
Is there a tattoo that you know is associated with the Banditos?
There is. It's a skull with a sombrero and guns.
Have there been other lawsuits involving the Banditos other than this Hernandez versus the County of Los Angeles case?
Yes.
And has the county been forced to litigate or settle those cases?
Yes.
And do you
Also,
know-
some are pending.
And the cases that have settled, do you know approximately how much money the county has paid in connection with Bandito-related?
I cannot give you such a figure. I can tell you that approximately $50 million has been paid in a recent analysis, or relatively recent, by the county regarding all deputy gangs, or alleged gangs, but I'm not sure about the Banditos specifically.
Did it come to your attention that the Internal Criminal Investigation Bureau, referred to as the ICIB, conducted an investigation of the Kennedy Hall event?
Yes.
And who was the lead investigator on behalf of the ICIB?
Jeffrey Chow.
Did you review any portion of the ICIB investigation?
I did, but more importantly, my staff did at my direction in great detail.
Based upon your review and the review of your staff, did you draw any conclusions about how the Banditos operated?
Yes.
And what was the general conclusion that you drew about the Banditos' activities?
The ICIB investigation is not my primary source for conclusions regarding the Banditos' activities as a potential law enforcement gang, because the investigating officer appears to have been directed not to investigate that matter, and the record itself is sparse. However, simply based upon that record, one can conclude that there was indeed an influence of that group in a gang-like way at that station, and that, as you described in your opening statement, deputies were scared of them.
Would you have expected that investigation into the alleged criminal conduct of sheriff deputies upon other sheriff deputies would have asked questions specifically about gang behavior?
I cannot imagine a gang investigation that didn't ask questions about gang affiliation. And in this case, it was alleged that this gang and retaliation against these individuals by this gang for disrespecting the gang was the motive. So I cannot imagine that not being done in a proper investigation.
Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit numbered 4, which is the LASD ICIB case activity log relating to the investigation of Kennedy Hall.
I see it. It appears to, exhibit number 4 appears to be a redacted version of a log presented by Jeffrey Chow.
And that investigation began on September 28th, 2018 by interviewing the victim in the hospital. Is that correct?
According to this log, yes.
And the investigation occurred with a lengthy list of interviews. Is that so? As many as 90 people were interviewed in connection?
Throughout the
with this?
course of the investigation, yes. There were many interviews. I'm not sure it gets up to 90 unless you include some subsequent investigation, but it is a large number.
And the investigation continued through February of 2020. Is that the case?
I think that's about right. I think that's when it was submitted to the DA's office, and that's also consistent with this log.
In 2018, was there an election for sheriff?
There was.
And when was that election?
That, I believe November was the runoff.
And as of November 27th, was Alex Villanueva the sheriff of Los Angeles County?
He was not. On November 26th, Jim McDonald conceded, at least privately, that he was not going to win the election and began a transition process. But Sheriff Villanueva was not the sheriff at that time.
Am I correct that the sheriff was sworn in on December the 3rd, 2018?
That's correct.
Did Alex Villanueva have any authority to give directions as to how the ICIB investigation should be conducted as of November 27th,
He did not.
2018?
He had no actual authority.
Let's look at exhibit number 4 and the entry of November 9th, 2018. Let me know when you have that.
I do.
There's a reference on November 9th, 2018 in this ICIB log to also Lieutenant Chevalier advised me OIG wanted additional questions about subcultures at East LA. Captain Burson confirmed additional questions needed to be asked. You see that?
I do.
Does that reflect the investigator Chow's receipt of a direction from your office about investigation that needed to be undertaken in connection with this matter?
No.
What does that reflect?
It reflects conversations within the sheriff's department about how the positions that OIG would likely take in public reports, such as the one I just expressed, that you have to investigate the motive when you're investigating a crime, and therefore them determining that they should act accordingly to avoid public embarrassment is what I think that refers to.
I see. And so who's Lieutenant Chevalier?
I do not know.
Would you look and read aloud the November 27th, 2018 reference in this ICIB log, the day after Sheriff McDonald conceded, but before Sheriff Villanueva took office?
It is dated November 27th, 2018, 1300 hours, and it reads, canceled interviews due to Captain/Chief Burson. He wanted to make sure I did not have to ask questions about subculture groups at East LA Station. Worked on Sergeant Wolanski case due to statute date is coming up.
Okay. Did you understand the reference to subculture groups to mean deputy cliques or gangs?
I did.
And what would be the proper investigatory reason for such an instruction to be given to Captain, but soon to be Chief Burson?
I cannot think of a proper investigatory reason.
Are you familiar with the sworn testimony of Investigator Chow that he was told by Captain Burson in connection with the November 27 entry that Captain Burson had to, quote, speak to the sheriff about pursuing questions about the subgroups?
I am familiar with testimony to that effect.
And in the context of the Kennedy Hall investigation, did the reference to subgroups mean Banditos?
Yes,
Was any subgroup besides Banditos involved in the Kennedy Hall incident?
no,
Please look, if you will, at the reference that immediately follows on December 7th, 2018, and if you would, read it aloud.
it is dated December 7th, 2018, 0900 hours, and reads, received the go-ahead to start interviewing witnesses for this case. Also, the chief person informed me that I do not need to ask about subculture groups in East LA Station. Spoke to attorney Sherry Lawrence representing Redacted and declined to be interviewed.
First, as we've said, Captain Burson, as of November 27th, was a captain, and on December 7th, 2018, 4 days after the sheriff was sworn in, he became chief. Is that how you understand the flow of this promotion?
At least by December 7th, he was officially be called chief. Whether or not he had already received the promotion or when precisely he did, I don't know. I know Villanueva made a number of promotions almost immediately upon being elected.
What would be the proper investigatory reason after checking with the sheriff to say there's no need to ask about subculture groups at the East LA station?
The only proper reason would be if it would somehow interfere with the investigation. And as I said, I can think of absolutely no reason why it would.
And again, by subculture groups, we're talking about the Banditos, aren't we?
We are.
Are you familiar with the sworn testimony by Investigator Chow that he understood that it was an order not to ask about subculture groups?
I don't have that before me specifically, but you want to refresh my recollection?
Yes.
Thank you.
Let me read to you briefly from page 33, lines 2 through 3. Sir, this is Inspector Chow. Sir, we're a paramilitary organization. He gives me an order, I follow through. And on the same page at paragraph numbered 14, he says, yeah, he had to check with the sheriff. Yes.
Thank you for refreshing my recollection. I now remember both those statements by Mr. Chow under oath.
I'm wondering, Mr. Dykesler, is it possible to give us the date of that deposition?
Yes,
And clearly identify who the deponent was?
Yes, the deposition is April 21st, 2022. The witness is Sergeant Jefferson Chow.
Thank you.
You familiar with the investigator's testimony that after interviewing 90 witnesses, he found no evidence to contradict the victim's claim that they were victims of an unprovoked and unresisted attack?
That's my understanding of how he testified, and also it's consistent with our review of the record of his investigation.
Is the ICIB an authorized agency to conduct investigations into gangs?
Yes,
Was the instruction to not ask about subgroups a lack of cooperation with that investigation?
it could be characterized as that. I think it's more serious than that.
Excuse me, Mr. Dykser, would you identify what the deposition, where the deposition comes from?
Yes, the deposition comes from the case of Art Hernandez et al. Against the County of Los Angeles, against Rafael Rene Munoz, also known as Big Listo, Gregory Rodriguez, also known as G-Rod, David Silverio, also known as Silver, Michael Hernandez, also known as Bam Bam.
Thank you very much.
In addition to the witnesses who testified or were interviewed, were there witnesses who declined to do so?
There were approximately 24.
Is the sheriff empowered to direct that witnesses cooperate with investigations?
Yes, and they're required to do so under sheriff's policy.
Did it ever come to your attention that the sheriff reversed direction and ordered recalcitrant witnesses to testify?
No,
Did it ever come to your attention that the sheriff reversed direction and instructed that there be investigation of the involvement of the Banditos in connection with the Kennedy Hall episode?
not in the criminal case.
Did you learn that the investigator, Chow, testified under oath that he believed the district attorney should have filed a criminal case against the perpetrators of the Kennedy Hall beatdown?
Yes,
Did you learn of the investigator's sworn testimony that he was surprised that the DA didn't file a criminal case against the Bandito perpetrators?
I believe that accurately describes his testimony.
Let me ask you to take a look at Exhibit 23.
Appears to be the DA reject in this case.
The DA reject. What do you mean by the DA reject?
The district attorney's office, when presented with a written set of reports from a law enforcement agency asking for a filing of criminal charges, will prepare a charge evaluation worksheet. And when the conclusion is that they will not file it, it is commonly referred to in law enforcement as the reject.
And the persons under investigation by the district attorney were Michael Bam Bam Hernandez, Gregory G. Rodriguez, David Silverio, and Rafael Big Listo Munoz. Is that what Exhibit 23 demonstrates?
That is correct.
And all of those are the defendants in the lawsuit against them and the county claiming they are banditos, correct?
That is correct.
Let me call your attention to page 4 and the third paragraph. That sets forth some of the conduct identifying what the 3 deputies did with a fellow deputy. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
And because my aged eyes are not what they once were, could you read aloud what the alleged conduct was?
The highlighted portion, do you just want the third paragraph or the highlighted portion?
Why don't you tell us about Rodriguez, Munoz, Silverio, Hernandez, and Vincent Moran to set the stage for us?
It states that they were all part of an older, more senior generation of deputy sheriffs who expressed their dislike of Gonzalez and his work ethic, and it refers to footnote 5, which I believe is significant. But skipping that, the next paragraph reads, on September 26, 2018, Rodriguez, Moran, Munoz confronted Gonzalez at the ELA station barbecue area and took turns criticizing his lack of work productivity, work hours, and being too comfortable for a newer deputy. Moran finished by telling Gonzalez to transfer to another patrol station. On September 27th, 2018, Silverio confronted Gonzalez at the party and told Gonzalez he was not good at the station, and M. Hernandez approached Gonzalez and called him a pussy and a rat.
And this is one sheriff's deputy speaking of another sheriff's deputy. Do I understand that correctly?
Speaking directly to.
Yes. Let me ask you, earlier you had suggested that not only was this failure to investigate a failure of cooperation, but something more. How would you characterize the failure to ask about the banditos in the investigation, to compel the witnesses who declined to testify? How do you see that, and doing so on the instruction of the sheriff?
The log that you have introduced or that you have presented as an exhibit, I don't believe was ever given to the district attorney's office until I gave it to them. So the information that we have here about the way they structured this investigation was not known to the district attorney's office when they rejected the case. And I believe the manner in which this case was investigated and presented amounted to a cover-up, essentially obstruction of justice.
And the obstruction of justice that you identify starts with whom?
I believe it started 50 years ago, but in the evidence here, Chief/Captain Burson, possibly expecting a promotion, directed that the investigation be conducted in a manner which would specifically not gather evidence regarding the gang motive of the assault.
Let me ask you to continue on with this DA's declination document and look, if you will, at footnote number 5.
Footnote 5 reads as follows. Although there was some mention of a subculture, quote, banditos, existing at the ELA station, the, quote, banditos were not a focus of this investigation, nor were the suspects definitively identified as being part of this subculture. Furthermore, whenever mentioned, the quote banditos were simply associated with a group of older, more senior deputies that simply ostracized younger deputies they felt were quote lazy. At no point in this investigation did any witnesses indicate that the quote banditos were equivalent to a gang or any type of criminal enterprise.
And is that a fair summary of what your investigation has determined is the action and behavior of the banditos?
No,
And why is that not fair?
because in this specific incident, there was ample evidence that there was prior incidents of the banditos, deputies who were members of the banditos, threatening this group in order to have an impact upon their employment opportunities. As we've discussed, the banditos operated in a gang-like way, a way that prior to this year could have been described as gang-like, but now must be because of the law that you've already put up. So I think this description of the banditos is not really having anybody to say they're like a gang. While it might represent the four corners of the document that was submitted to the DA's office because of the direction of Chief/Captain Burson, it doesn't accurately reflect what, I think even as to that, there are some evidence in it, but it doesn't accurately reflect the state of what the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department knew to be the truth regarding the banditos at that time and at this time.
So would it be a fair summary to say that the Sheriff's Department didn't accurately report to the district attorney the facts it knew regarding the crime that was being investigated?
I believe that is more than a fair statement.
Would it be fair to say that the determination of prosecution or non-prosecution made by the district attorney was based upon information which was withheld from the district attorney?
Yes.
Is that consistent with good law enforcement practice?
No.
Let me ask you to take a look in this same exhibit at page 11. Again, it's exhibit 23. It's entitled Statements of Other LASD Personnel at the Party.
I see it.
And that section summarizes that 21 deputies declined to be interviewed.
That is correct.
And is it your understanding that that was in addition to the 4 suspects who also declined to be interviewed?
Yes, the 4 suspects would have had a Fifth Amendment right, and it was perfectly appropriate for them to decline. The 21 witnesses did not, as far as I know.
So 25 recipient witnesses were not interviewed. Is that your understanding?
I believe that's correct.
And do you know whether the 4 principal targets actually asserted their Fifth Amendment right or just declined to be interviewed and weren't compelled?
I don't know the answer to that sitting here, and it would be standard practice in any such investigation not to interview them on the assumption that they would assert their Fifth Amendment rights. So it is possible they didn't actually have to do it.
Was there any evidence the sheriff tried to compel the deputies to answer the investigators' questions?
The 21 deputies?
Yes.
Absolutely no evidence.
Was the lack of cooperation documented in Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 23 by the giving of that instruction not to ask about subgroups a violation of the Penal Code of 13670?
Yes.
Does the instruction not to ask about the banditos and the failure to order deputy cooperation violate the Penal Code section other than 13670?
I believe it does. It certainly, on its face, violates 13670, but I believe it also amounts to obstruction of justice.
And that obstruction of justice, again, rests with Captain Burson and the sheriff who gave that instruction, as you understand in Investigator Chow's testimony.
If the sheriff gave that instruction.
Speaking of lack of cooperation, let me have you look at Exhibit 5, please.
I see Exhibit 5.
Is that a letter dated January 19th, 2022 to the sheriff from you?
Yes.
Does that letter reference Penal Code section 13670 and request information?
It does.
And the information requested includes names of potential deputy gang members and documents regarding deputy gangs?
Among other things, yes.
And did you receive a response from the Undersheriff Murakami on behalf of Sheriff Villanueva?
I don't consider a response because it didn't come from Sheriff Villanueva and it didn't give us anything, but I did receive a letter from Undersheriff Murakami.
Well, no surprise. Take a look at exhibit number 6. A letter dated February 10th, 2022 And is that the non-response response?
That's the non-response response.
Did the sheriff authorize the release of any names?
No,
Did the sheriff authorize the release of any documents?
no,
Did the letter threaten you with a defamation claim?
yes.
Did you on March 21st respond to the February 10th letter?
Well, I'll bet that's Exhibit 7, and it is. I did.
What a coincidence.
Thank you.
Did you in that letter identify by name the potential law enforcement gangs about whom you sought information?
I did.
And would you look at page 5 of that letter?
Oh, yes, here it is.
And what were the names of gangs that you wish to obtain information regarding?
The ones I specifically listed, although of course in our first, it included all potential law enforcement gangs, are the executioners, the gladiators, the use of a term old ink and new ink, which I do not know to be a gang as such, but makes distinctions within the gangs, Banditos, Regulators, Jump Out Boys, Gladiators, the Grim Reapers, the Vikings, and in any other group alleged by anyone to be a potential law enforcement gang.
From March 21st, when you sent that letter through today, would you share with the commissioners the information that you've received from the sheriff regarding the requested documents?
I cannot because I've received nothing.
Have you received a response?
I don't recall. I've received many letters at times from the sheriff and the undersheriff, but not ones providing the documents requested.
Under the penal code definition that we've been studying in 13670, would you agree the sheriff has failed to cooperate with any investigation into gangs by an inspector general?
I do wholeheartedly agree with that.
In order for the sheriff to appear for a deposition, did your office serve a subpoena?
Yes, but not a deposition, just testimony.
In the first instance, did the sheriff obey the subpoena?
No,
Was your office through county council forced to bring an enforcement action against the sheriff to enforce that subpoena?
yes,
And after the sheriff lost his motion to quash, did he appear?
he did.
And did you regard that having to bring motions to force the sitting sheriff of Los Angeles County to testify as his cooperating as he was required to do under the Penal Code 13670?
The penal code does have an exception that allows people to assert lawful rights. And so there is an argument to be made that on a matter of first impression, that it's legitimate for the sheriff to question the right of the inspector general to serve a subpoena. I believe it is rather clear in the penal code. And then having appeared the first time, we had to go back to court to get him ordered to swear to tell the truth. So I suppose there's an argument to be made that it would be an assertion of a proper right for the sheriff to claim that having been forced to appear, he didn't have to say he would tell the truth. But a court disagreed and he was ordered to apply. I view it as not cooperating, but I think there's an argument to be made that those legal actions might be, he might be given a pass on those. But he's done other things than that.
And as we go through the hearings, we'll hear more.
You may.
Inspector General, let me ask you, when the sheriff did appear, did he testify?
Ultimately, yes. Recently, he came and testified. He answered some questions and not others.
And was he accompanied by lawyers?
Yes.
And how many lawyers did he bring with him?
3 lawyers, I believe.
One more thing. I've read this in the paper and I thought I'd give you a chance to talk about it. Are you a Holocaust denier?
No.
The sheriff has also stated that you're the subject of a criminal investigation. Is the public announcement that a specific person is under investigation a standard police practice?
It is almost never done.
And can you imagine why the sheriff of Los Angeles County would accuse the inspector general of being a Holocaust denier and publicly state that he was under investigation?
Yes.
And what is that reason that you surmise?
I believe that I'm the victim of a extortion attempt under 518 of the Penal Code, along with all the other public officials, including those sitting to my left and those sitting to my right, who are responsible for oversight of the sheriff. Since he was elected, he has engaged in a campaign to threaten and harass anybody who was a critic of his, particularly those who had the actual legal authority to criticize him.
Pass the witness.
Are there, I'm going to invite the ad hoc committee on deputy cliques and gangs to ask any questions if commissioners would like to, and then I'll invite my colleagues on the commission as well.
I guess this is a question. I'm not sure it's to the Inspector General or to Mr. Dykesler, but just listening to the testimony and the instructions that were given by Captain, Commander, Chief Person, I'm wondering whether it might be appropriate for the Oversight Commission to consider a subpoena to Chief Person so we can understand who, if anyone, gave him instructions to order that there be no questions about the Banditos or subcultures at East LA stations. I guess I'll put that to Mr. Dykesler.
Judge Bonner, it is our absolute intention to serve a subpoena and enforce it if necessary, to have Chief Person explain the circumstances of the instruction that he gave. But it's not available today. In our next session or one after that, we'll do all we can to have the chief explain himself.
All I would say is just it's an observation, but just given the length of time it's taken this commission to enforce any of its subpoenas, the sooner we issue it, the better. If you think a witness is going to be necessary at any point during your investigation on behalf of this on behalf of the Oversight Commission.
I'll present a subpoena to the ad hoc subpoena committee this afternoon.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, I will add in that we have also already subpoenaed him in the Office of Inspector General. And since we are conducting a joint investigation, we will make any information he should provide us, should it be enforced, available to this commission.
Thank you, Mr. Huntsman.
Leo?
Yes, early on in this quite enlightening and incredible testimony, Mr. Huntsman, you made reference to the fact that you separately received information about the regulators. Can you indicate to us what that separately received information and what the source of that was?
In general, I can tell you that the regulators are a well-known group within the Sheriff's Department, and I've heard multiple references to them. The specific information I'm referring to you, I cannot share because it is privileged under a bunch of privileges, including the attorney-client privilege. I could tell you some things about it, but it wouldn't do any good because the core matters I couldn't convey other than to say it's something that I learned about prior to the RAND study, and my concerns about it, my attempts to investigate are part of what triggered the RAND study.
Thank you very much.
Any commissioners have any questions? Emma? Emma?
My concern is after finding out that a lot of information was not given to the DA, will there be a correction to that?
We published in 2020 on our website and also shared with the DA the description that you have as an exhibit now. And unfortunately, it did not result in any action by the district attorney. We did not have the ICIB log at that time. Upon obtaining it, I made sure the DA's office got it. So they are aware of it. This is a public hearing, so they'll be aware of this. And what action, if any, they choose to take will be up to them.
Thank you.
Wouldn't it be correct, though, Mr. Huntsman, that the statute of limitations is run on the assaultive behavior that occurred in 2018?
That is correct, although the statute, it has not run on some other potential crimes that could be charged around it.
Thank you, Inspector Huntsman, for coming and testifying. A question about, during your investigation, was there any identification of the tattoos and whether they get the tattoos together or get the tattoos separately?
Generally, we have learned or been told that it works both ways. There are times when an individual will be invited and he'll generally be taken by one or more other people to a tattoo artist who's provided a template, and then the tattoo is put on. But there also have been what have been referred to as inking parties. So it is possible that more than one person got a tattoo at a time, but it's most often one tattoo receiver and one or more members of the group that are facilitating that happening.
I was going to ask about the inking parties. The inking parties, is it the same exact tattoo or is it a similar tattoo?
It tends to be pretty exact. We're talking about a phenomenon that's existed for 50 years, and there's a change in tattoos over that time. So if you wanted to look at the whole thing as one single entity, then certainly there are different tattoos. They're different groups. But as to any particular one, they seem to be very consistent. And it is alleged, as to the 2015 incident in which recently was publicized, a photograph of a tattoo with a bullet hole in it, a bullet wound. That is alleged to have been the result of a change in that tattoo that was not found acceptable by old ink versus new ink. So there are some instances of change, but they seem to be resisted. And for the most part, they do not change. There's a sequential number placed next to each tattoo, so that's different. And then eventually that tattoo is left behind and a new tattoo or a new group is started up is what we generally hear.
One of the groups you mentioned, I believe, was 998.
That was mentioned in that memo from 2004. 998 is a reference involving police shootings. It's not a group as such, I don't believe.
Well, that's what I was trying to understand. Was there a subculture or a gang that identified their group as 998 for only those that were involved in a deputy involved shooting?
Not in that way, to my knowledge. There have been allegations over the years that some of the guns that are displayed in a gang tattoo will have smoke placed on them if you have been involved in a police shooting. And I've heard allegations that people are courted for membership or offered membership as a result of a shooting, but I've never heard an allegation that there is a gang specific that is members of those who've been involved in a police shooting.
What about those that have tattoos that say 998 that were involved in a deputy involved shooting?
It is not unheard of for law enforcement to get a tattoo in response to a police shooting, and 998 would be something they might put on as a tattoo because it's universally known that that's what that means. That's not unusual. That allegation has been made and confirmed in some instances, independent of gang allegations, that deputies who were involved or officers who were involved in this life or death situation sometimes place a tattoo on their body to remember it. It has been alleged that has been as an indicator of inappropriate conduct, and sometimes that it has to do with a near-death experience of their own, but it's not always associated with gangs. The gang association that I've heard mentioned is the smoke on the gun tattoo, but I couldn't say that doesn't also happen outside the potential gang context.
Thank you, Inspector.
The microphone.
Can you use the
Mic-
microphone so that we're live streaming?
Thank you, Max. My question is, from your experience and your investigations and your contact with the department, the sheriff has declared, and I believe it's also on the website, that he has taken care of whatever remnants from the past of gang behavior, cliques, et cetera, that he's transferred people from one station to another. Do you have any evidence of knowing the people who were transferred, or that any action specifically related to the issue of the cliques and the gangs that the sheriff has said that he has taken?
No, I will say there's two qualifications to that. One is he has publicly talked quite a bit about 26 transfers out of East Los Angeles. And in that instance, the captain of East LA, during the time in which he described that, has said under oath that those were not Bandito-related transfers. And I happen, based on information I've seen, happen to know that some of them were the alleged victims of the Banditos assault. So I'm pretty sure they weren't transferred to bust up the Banditos. So that one is not supported. And then the general answer is no. I'm aware of some people under the sheriff doing some movement around stations because they got wind of a gang-related issue and wanted to try to improve it. So it's not the case to say that the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department is oblivious to this problem, but the sheriff actually removing the problem, I'm aware of no evidence of that.
JP?
Thank you. Mr. Huntsman, I'm doing a follow-on to Commissioner Cooper's question. Now that we have this new information that there appears to have been some interference in the investigation, is it possible that the internal affairs investigation into misconduct, wherein the 21 people who didn't or refused to be interviewed by ICIB could be compelled to be interviewed by internal affairs, could that investigation be either reopened or a new investigation started to compel them to tell the department what they know about the Banditos?
There was, as is usually the case in any law enforcement agency, but particularly in the sheriff's department, an internal affairs investigation that followed the internal criminal investigation. And in that investigation, many people were compelled and some Banditos were identified. And that is the source of when we wrote to the sheriff and told him we wanted information, we specifically pointed out, you've conducted a couple of investigations. You've identified 41 potential gang members, and we identified 10 that they identified. There's a lot more Banditos than 10, and I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for the sheriff's department to solve this problem through an internal investigation, but yes, that could certainly be done.
Thank you.
Could I just, on a follow on that question, I'm wondering, do we have the names of the 21 deputies who declined to be interviewed? And if we do, should we consider, I don't need an answer right now, but should we consider subpoenaing them before a public hearing? That is before this body, the Oversight Commission. I ask you, Mr. Dykesler.
Have the names.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll consider that in due course.
Well,
Yes, Mr. Huntsman, in following up from Commissioner Giggins's question and in statements that you've made, you've indicated that there were transfers from East LA Station. What has happened to the victims in the Bandito complaint and investigation? Are they still at East LA? Are they still with the department?
For the most part, they're still with the department. I do not believe they're at East LA, and Vincent Miller, their lawyer, would be the best person to ask about that. I have not tracked where they are at this time.
Thank you.
anyone else? Max, I just have one question. Chief Matthew Burson, isn't he the person who announced at a press conference that he had been appointed by the sheriff to investigate the Banditos and the executioners and also conduct a comprehensive investigation throughout the entirety of the department about deputy gangs?
Yes.
Mr. Dykesler, I don't think
I
there,
think you should follow up. And have we ever seen an investigative report from Chief Burson with respect to the existence of deputy cliques, gangs, or exclusionary subgroups?
No, nor am I aware of any such investigation, any internal report. And the interim sheriff, John Scott, made a similar promise years earlier that also wasn't done. So I don't expect that there is such a report.
Mr. Dykesler. Excellent.
For the questions, our next witness is Lieutenant Walters.
thank you.
I'd say Commissioner Giggins, before you leave, I will tell you that we will have two witnesses today who will answer your question.
Could you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I wholeheartedly do.
Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Would you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
My name is Larry Andrew Waldy, and my last name is spelled Waldie.
And sir, how are you employed?
I'm employed by the County of Los Angeles in the capacity of a law enforcement officer, deputy sheriff.
And what rank do you currently hold in the LASD?
I am a lieutenant,
And how long have you been a member of the LASD?
going on over 22 years, sir.
I understand, sir, that you are a member of LASD royalty. Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit number 2, page number 5.
Yes, sir.
And let's make sure we get it up. I've set as my goal for this examination, not dropping the exhibit book. Page numbered 5 of exhibit number 2 says, Chief Ronnie Williams has advised myself and Larry Waldy, this is the memorandum dated September 13th, 2004, about his efforts in addressing inappropriate and potentially damaging behavior occurring at Century Station. Would I be correct saying that in September of 2004, you were not the Larry Waldy who was investigating a gang in Century Station?
That's correct, sir.
And who was Larry Waldy?
Larry Waldy is my father. He is currently retired as the former undersheriff.
And so here we are 18 years later, discussing the same subject matter as your dad had investigated at that time. Well, here we go. Could you summarize for us briefly your career in the LASD in the service of the public?
I came on in 2000 as a deputy sheriff from the academy. I worked the jails, essentially responsible for the care, the welfare of the inmates at Century Regional Detention Facility in Linwood. I went on to do some minor database applications for the department regarding retroactive contracts. I then became a deputy at Compton Station from 2005 to approximately 2009, working also at Compton Station in 2007 to 2009 for the gang unit, Operation Safe Streets Bureau as a gang enforcement deputy. I then promoted to sergeant in 2009, and I was working Lennox Station in field activities. I was then put on loan to the CCGV's recommendation of the Commander Management Task Force, and that was to analyze significant force incidents or any incidents that look like they might reach a level of high-risk management issues. And then I promoted to lieutenant, and I did a couple gigs, one up in NCCF, North Correctional Facility, and then risk management lieutenant, analyzing trends and reporting on them for managers, unit commanders within custody facilities. And then I became the operations lieutenant at Twin Towers for a little over a year. Then I came back to Compton as a lieutenant in 2017.
Okay, and I should ask when you first made lieutenant.
That was approximately 2013.
And what were the circumstances of your returning to the Compton Station where you had been from 2005 to 2009?
Well, I was asked to stay by who's now a chief, my captain, Laura Lacravane. She said that I had a promising career there in custody because I did a great job for her. However, I wanted to learn the ropes as a field lieutenant. So I put in a transfer to go to patrol, start over again from the bottom.
When you were at Compton, sir, who was the captain in charge?
His name is Michael Thatcher. He was the captain at the time I arrived there.
And I should ask for purposes of candor, do you have a tattoo?
Yes, sir.
And what is the tattoo associated with?
It is associated with a group of deputies from Compton Station. As Mr. Huntsman had placed in a memo, the name is the Gladiators. And it was associated with essentially serving the community, hard work, the ability to teach others, share information with others, and do the right thing.
When did you obtain your tattoo as a gladiator?
I believe it was in 2007, after about 2 years working Compton Station.
And when you arrived at Compton Station as a lieutenant, what were your duties?
I was a watch commander on early morning shift, which is graveyard shift.
And are you familiar with the term shot caller?
Yes, sir.
And what does that term mean within the context of the department?
A shot caller is a term, as I heard in previous testimony, that is given to someone within a gang, someone that wields extreme power and essentially calls the shots for a subset or a specific gang.
And during the time you were at Compton Station, was there a shot caller?
Yes.
And who was that shot caller?
His name was Jaime Juarez.
And did Jaime Juarez belong to a deputy clique?
Yes, sir.
And what clique was that?
That clique has come to be known as, lack of a name that I know of, that's been widespread in the media, called the Executioners.
And during the time you were at Compton Station, when Jaime Juarez was the shot caller, were there other executioners other than Deputy Juarez?
Yes, sir.
And about how many executioners were there at the Compton Station during the time that you were there?
I'm off the top of my head, a guess would probably be about 10 to 15 that I
Can you-
know of.
Can you call the names of any executioners who were there at the time you were?
I can name a few. Let's see, Anthony Bautista, Jaime Juarez, Edgar Cuevas, David Navarrete. Let's see.
Was a Deputy Barajas, a executioner?
Yes, I found out ultimately later that he had been, in fact, was a member of the executioners.
What about Deputy Ingersoll? Was he an executioner?
Yes, sir.
As you understood it, was membership in the executioners open to people of any gender or race?
As far as I understood, and I don't understand where they developed their qualifications for inclusion into their group, but no, I did not know of any women or hear of any blacks specifically that were included.
How did the executioners, if they did, exercise power or influence in the Compton station?
Well, Jaime Juarez was called the shot caller because of, as Mr. Huntsman mentioned, I believe it was Mr. Stonich had actually written that they had influence over scheduling overtime, days off, specific specialized positions, as well as held certain positions within the station that were influential, such as Detective Bureau and training officers.
By the way, do training officers get paid an increased amount of money from a deputy who is not a training officer?
Yes, sir.
And how much in addition does a training officer get?
I believe when you're a senior training officer, that's pretty much top step after a year of training someone. But best of my knowledge, it's about 10 to 12% increase in pay per month.
And so being a training officer is a financially valuable as well as powerful position in the Compton station at the time you were there.
Yes, sir.
Did the executioners have tattoos?
Yes.
Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit number 8. And I'm going to ask you whether that represents an executioner tattoo.
Come to be my understanding that that is in fact the insignia that they place on their body.
Well, let's go back. I want to see the flags. So there are 2 flags. Do you, what's the one on the left?
Left appears to be a pro law enforcement, thin blue line, as well as pro military flag.
And the one on the right?
It appears to be that group at Compton Station.
And is it your understanding that those flags are on Deputy Jaime Juarez's vehicle?
That is correct.
And let me ask you to take a look at exhibit number 9 so we can home in on an executioner. That's a publicly published photo of a Deputy Aldana. Was he a deputy in Compton Station when you were?
Yes, sir.
And was he a member of the executioners?
Yes, sir.
And is that an accurate depiction of what an executioner tattoo looks like?
Yes, sir. It's the tattoo he described as having when he was deposed by an attorney regarding a civil lawsuit.
And that's the same tattoo as appears on the flag that we just looked at for Deputy Juarez.
Yes, sir.
You've talked about the positions that were occupied by the executioners, which were powerful. And let me focus first on the scheduling deputy position. Who was the scheduling deputy at Compton in 2018 and 2019?
His name is Jaime Juarez.
And in your experience, why is that a powerful position?
Because he essentially controls deputies, everyone working on the line, their livelihood. Overtime, as I mentioned, great spots, recommendations for being on loan, items that come up, like essentially like training in DB for deputies to acquire more skills.
And are there parts of the area covered by the Compton station which are desirable or less desirable?
Yes, sir.
And what would be an example of a less desirable spot?
There are a couple. One would be a traffic unit. No deputy that comes to Compton Station that I know of wants to work traffic. They want to make a difference, make a dent in crime, however that difference is, according to their moral compass. However, there is also a spot which is a town center, which is guarding a commercial shopping center.
mall cop job in effect.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that would be an undesirable position, I gather.
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with the term fast station?
Yes, sir.
And what is the term fast station in the lexicon of the LASD mean?
Well, our definition of a fast station would be a station that sees a high amount of violent crime.
And was Compton considered a fast station?
Definitely.
Before going to a patrol station, is it the general practice of the LASD that deputies work in the jails?
Yes, sir.
And was there a particular location in the men's central jail which was regarded as a path to a fast station?
Yes, sir. I'd heard there were a couple floors.
Did the executioners you knew of generally come from the 3,000 floor of a men's central jail?
Yes, sir.
You heard Inspector Huntsman refer to the 3,000 boys and the CCJV. Is it fair to say that the 3,000 floor men's central jail served as a feeder for executioners in the Compton station?
For the most part, yes.
Do you know whether the Citizens Commission on Jail Violence specifically identified the 3,000 boys as particularly dangerous who needed to be broken up?
Yes, sir.
I'd like to turn your attention to 2019 at Compton Station. What position did you hold in 2019 at Compton Station?
As of the end of 2018, starting in officially January 2019, I was made the de facto captain of Compton Station, called the acting captain.
And did there come a time when Deputy Juarez was going to leave the Compton Station and his position as scheduling deputy needed to be filled by somebody else?
Yes, sir.
And did you have a discussion with Deputy Juarez about a successor for him as scheduling deputy?
Yes, sir.
And where did that conversation take place?
It took place in my office.
And was it initiated by him or initiated by you?
He approached me, sir.
And would you tell me and all the people here, what was said by Deputy Juarez on the occasion of his getting ready to leave the Compton Station?
Deputy Juarez it was intended that he stay at Compton Station. He was being released to the field because under a previous administration, he was involved in a large number of deputy-involved shootings, 998s. And when the sheriff took power, Mr. Murakami, under sheriff, granted him his ability to go back to patrol. And he asked me first, before this meeting, if he could stay in scheduling. He wanted to maintain his powers, what I assume. And I sent it up the chain of command, and they said, no, you had to go back to the line, work as a deputy. And
Let me make sure I understand it before we get into it further. He had been relieved of responsibility as a patrol deputy because he had been involved in shootings.
he had been relegated to a non-field spot, low risk management, no contact with the public.
Okay, but remained an LASD deputy with responsible power as a scheduling deputy in a fast station at Compton. Do I understand you so far correctly?
Yes, sir. He was told not to wear his uniform outside the station.
Okay, so please return, if you will, to the narrative of Deputy Juarez and you in your office on that occasion.
When I explained to him that he had to go back to the field, according to the chief, and according to Chief Vera, he returned shortly after, I forget exactly when, it was within a couple weeks, and announced that he had suggestions for his replacement.
And so Deputy Juarez, who is now being removed from one position to be returned to another, offered the opportunity to advise you as the acting captain, who he thought would be up to the task of being the scheduling deputy at Compton. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir.
And what did Deputy Juarez suggest?
Deputy Juarez had a list of about 10 individuals who were, as I could see, based on being there for the last year and a half, 2 years, were loyal to him.
And by loyal to him, do you mean members of the executioners?
Some of them, yes. Some of them, I assumed that were more intimidated and would follow his orders.
And given his suggestion of this group of 10, what was your response, sir?
I told him that I appreciated his suggestion, but that I was going to ensure that the station had a scheduling deputy that had no affiliation with any tattoo, including my own, for the fairness of the community, for the fairness of the station, because of morale and because of public safety. I did not want that to trickle over into the public. And he told me that, and that's what I told him. I said, thank you, but no thank you.
And what did he say in response?
He said that the guys on the line are telling me that if you do not obey this or follow this request, that we are going to initiate a work slowdown.
Initiate the what?
Work slow down.
A work slowdown.
And what does a work slowdown mean in the context of the sheriff's department in Los Angeles County?
Well, it's an exactly the way I describe it is it's doing less police work proactively, only taking calls for service. And when you do take those calls for service, you ensure that your service is diminished by longer response times for non-priority calls, non-emergent calls, as well as not having a police presence, allowing crime to rise within the community.
During the month of March 2019, was there a slowdown?
Yes, sir.
And during the month of March 2019, was there an increase in crime in the area patrolled by Compton deputies?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit number 19. And is this a document that is obtained from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department?
Yes, sir.
And it is a document that reflects crime in the city of Compton. The top part being from August 2017 through July 31st, 2018. And the second being from August 1st, 2018 through July 31st, 2019.
Yes, sir.
Would you, we're focused on a slowdown in March when you say crime increased. First, you had involvement, didn't you, in your career in creation of data sets?
Yes, sir.
And how much time did you spend analyzing data?
I would say I built databases for a couple of years prior to coming to patrol. And then as a risk management lieutenant, approximately a year, analyzing data, trends, sets.
So you were familiar with analysis of data before we get to this document, is that fair?
Yes, sir.
So would you tell me first, let's look at, I guess I should ask how long the slowdown lasted.
It lasted approximately 4 weeks, maybe a little longer.
And
Fine.
that was in the month of March of 2019.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's take a look, if we can, at the crime statistics for February, the month preceding the slowdown, and contrast that with the numbers of crimes reported in the month of March. How did those numbers compare?
Well, it almost doubled.
And how does the March of 2019 compare to the March of 2018?
That number is significantly higher, 21 more major crimes.
And after the slowdown ended in early April, what happened to the number of committed crimes in the city of Compton Station?
They went down dramatically.
And so was it your observation in real time that there was a slowdown of work in March 2019 that led to a rise in crime?
Yes, sir. Before I received this data, I was being told by certain individuals within the station, they had pertinent knowledge that a work slowdown had in fact was occurring.
And let me ask you to take a look at exhibit numbered 11. And that is another official document of the LA Sheriff's Department reporting arrests from January 2018 and January 2019 through March 31st of 2018 and 2019.
Yes, sir.
And taking a look at the number of arrests in February of 2019, I guess we could start in January. Start in January of 2019 through February of 2019. And then look at March. What was the trend prior to March of 2019?
It appears the arrests were high and they began to, as I had mentioned, the end of February, early March, when the work slowdown was alleged to have started, they started to drop from January to February, and then there was a significant drop of over 100 arrests in the month of March.
Other than the work slowdown initiated by the executioners, do you know of a legitimate reason for why there would be declining arrests in the midst of a crime wave?
I don't know of any other reason, based on my experience and based on analyzing the numbers of why this happened.
Was the conduct of a work slowdown by sworn officers consistent with the fundamental principles of professional policing?
It was definitely incongruent with the fundamentals of professional policing.
Is there an effect upon the community with increased crime and a police slowdown?
Yes, sir.
And how would you describe that?
I would say that public safety is jeopardized.
Do you know whether deputies who didn't wish to slow down work were harassed or otherwise pressured to do so?
I knew of a specific incident. Yes, sir.
Would you share that with the commission?
I was told that Deputy Ingersoll approached a deputy that refused to slow down and be proactive. And this deputy specifically was told when he brought a gun arrest into the station that he was not to bring gun arrest into the station, that he asked him, Deputy Ingersoll asked this deputy if he understood that there was a work slowdown. And he said he did, but that he didn't operate in the manner that they did.
And Deputy Ingersoll, you testified earlier, was an executioner, correct?
Yes.
Now, while this slowdown was going on, were there communications in real time that memorialized the fact of the slowdown?
Yes.
And let me ask you to take a look at exhibit numbered 12. And for reasons of confidentiality, we have redacted the names of the participants.
Sir, there's a name up there right now
Not here, but
the
that's
very-
the book.
on the, up there too, within the text message.
I thought we had, well, I apologize for it. I won't ask you about the name of the individual, but tell me, if you will, what this text message reflects.
Basically, I'm asking this individual to get me the tag number for a 415 business call that two I later identified as executioners weren't responding to in time. They had to be texted, from what I heard. They had to be texted to essentially handle their call.
So let me understand this. It would have been a radio call asking for assistance of a patrol unit,
Yes, sir.
and there was no response to it.
Right, there was a disturbance at a business and there was no response, I believe, for over 45 minutes.
And so the deputies involved had to receive a text in order to get them to do their job.
Yes, sir.
And is that consistent with fundamental principles of professional policing?
Definitely not.
Let me ask you to look at the third page of this exchange of emails, texts, I'm sorry. And is the top portion, I'll keep my eye and ear open, written by you or written by the person with whom you are communicating?
This is a person whom I was communicating with. And I was asking this individual if I could, if they had any proof, as well as what I had heard about the lack of a proper response, they had any information related to the work slowdown.
And so you were asking for the accumulation of certain statistics, is that
Yes.
right?
With certain statistics or any type of information that could lead me in the right direction as to who was involved in this and the operation of the work slowdown.
And the person, the member of the department that you're asking to provide this information writes, "But please, between you and I, this could ruin my career. I don't want my name mentioned at all. Please, I can't have that." And you respond, "Copy, thanks, will do. I understand you're risking a lot and I appreciate it. I wouldn't do that to you." In that exchange, what did you understand the person with whom you were discussing was fearful of?
This individual is fearful of that group being uncovered as someone that was doing the right thing and would be potentially retaliated against.
And is that a reflection of the culture of the Compton station in 2019?
Yes, sir.
And is this kind of reluctance to provide information requested by a superior for fear of retaliation consistent with fundamental principles of professional policing?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, is the fear of providing requested information consistent with the fundamental principles of professional policing?
No, sir.
Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit numbered 13, which is an email from you dated April 1st, 19 to Captain Thatcher. And you have it in front of you? Oh, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir, I do.
You'll observe we've redacted the names that you describe. What did this email relate to?
This email was essentially my documentation after I was rebuffed, or at least my efforts to inform him that there was a work slowdown were rebuffed. He had told me that, there could be some other explanation. Let's wait till the numbers come in April, which they did. So this was a formal documentation to notify him that I was proceeding further with an inquiry, and these were some individuals that I had in mind.
And in the very first line, you say, FYI, arrest stats are lower than last year's March numbers, which in 2018 had increased from the prior month. Also, they are trending lower in Feb and March of this year. Jaime came to me near the end of February. And who is the Jaime to whom you make reference in Exhibit 13?
I was referring to the scheduling deputy, a shot caller.
And let me ask you to take a look at exhibit numbered 14. And that is an April 8th, 2019 email from you to Captain Thatcher. I should ask, was Thatcher still a captain, or had he been promoted as of this time that you were communicating with him?
When he was promoted to commander, as soon as Sheriff Villanueva took office, essentially, about 3 weeks later, I was made the captain of Compton Station. So he was now my commander. He still directly oversaw Compton Station.
So we learned that Sheriff Villanueva became the sheriff in December 3rd of 2018, and you became the acting captain as of January 2019.
Unofficially, end of December, Captain Thatcher had taken a couple of weeks off. He had heard that he was going to be promoted. So, but yes, officially it was January 4th of 2019. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Captain, but soon to be Commander Thatcher had been promoted by Sheriff Villanueva, correct?
Yes, sir.
As of this time of the promotion of then Commander Thatcher, was there any question that people were aware of the role of the executioners in Compton?
No.
Was it a secret that there had been a gang-like behavior involving the executioners as of the time this captain was promoted to commander by Sheriff Villanueva?
It was no secret. Deputy Aldama had in 2018, and I believe it was Maya Lau from the LA Times had published that story, expressing or demonstrating that there was a clique at Compton Station with that tattoo involved in a shooting of Donta Taylor.
And notwithstanding the fact of the knowledge, and Thatcher was the captain during that period, is that
Yes, sir.
so? And notwithstanding the public knowledge of the involvement of the executioners, Captain Thatcher was promoted by the sheriff to commander. Do I understand that correctly?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. So we're back to Exhibit 14, which is an email from you to, I guess, Commander Thatcher. I heard they called off the work slowdown. I'm hearing his support was dwindling. So that's an email that you sent to the commander. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
And when you make reference to his support, to whom were you referring?
I was referring to Jaime Juarez.
So it's fair to say that by the first week of April or so, that the slowdown had ended.
That's as far as I understood it, yes.
When you say his support was dwindling, what do you mean by support dwindling?
Well, I felt there were the fact that he was no longer a scheduling deputy. He was assigned to the line, and I had a female operating as the scheduling deputy with no affiliation with any tattoo. She was impartial. That he had no ability to coerce anyone to do as he said, and I felt also there might have been some collusion between the commander, most likely, after my email 7 days prior, telling Jaime Juarez that this guy's onto you and you better knock it off quickly.
Let me ask you to take a look at exhibit number 15. And that is an email from you to, is it Commander?
That is now Chief Lackervain, but at the time, a lieutenant who was was planning on interviewing for Compton Station Captain during the interview process.
And what was the purpose of your sending that email to now Chief Lackervain?
Well, to be completely honest, she asked for stats so that she could understand, the current state of crime within Compton. If she was to be asked these stats during an interview with stakeholders, city stakeholders, I threw in there on purpose because I didn't feel like I was supported by executive level, that there was a work slowdown. I was letting her know that there was a work slowdown. She was the operations lieutenant, a couple operations lieutenants before me. So I thought she would take an interest in that.
You say you didn't feel supported by executive level. What did you mean by that?
I felt that Commander Thatcher was undermining me and essentially supporting these individuals that were violating 13670.
Let me ask you to take a quick look at exhibit numbered 16. And am I correct that those are public documents that reflect a collection of reports involving 4 separate officer-involved shootings by Deputy Juarez?
Give me a second, sir, Mr. Dykesler. I will quickly verify that. Yes, they appear to be the reports that I saw during a shooting analysis committee.
And they reflect 4 shootings by him in the period 2006 to 2015.
It appears so, sir.
And in your experience, is that an unusual number of shootings for a deputy?
My personal experience, yes.
And well, you're a 22-year career LASD officer. How many officer-involved shootings have you been involved in?
None.
Was Deputy Juarez initially removed from patrol?
Yes, sir.
Was he returned to the streets when Sheriff Villanueva took office?
Yes, sir.
Could you take a look at exhibit numbered 22? And what is exhibit number 22?
Exhibit number 22 is an investigator deputy list. It was promulgated on a few days ago on the 20th of May. And it lists Jaime Juarez as the number 2, second individual, second highest scoring individual for a detective position within the department.
So is this a list that was published on Friday regarding promotions in the LASD?
Well, yes, it was those who were eligible for promotion based on this test, these candidates. Yes, sir.
Let me make sure. Is this the same number 2 here? Is this the same Jaime Juarez, the executioner who led the slowdown and has been involved in at least 4 officer-involved shootings?
Yes, sir.
During the time that you were at the station in Compton, was an executioner involvement in a shooting something that was celebrated to your knowledge?
I did not initially know that, but I ultimately, in July of 2019, after a deputy involved shooting, I found out that that was the case.
What is a 998 debrief?
I would liken it to, from what was explained to me by the individual telling me about it happening, or it was to happen in real time, that it was a celebration of a shooting.
Would you take a look at exhibit numbered 17, please?
Yes, sir.
So these are texts between you and whom?
So an unidentified, another source had texted me, and you'll see the screenshot embedded in this page. And it was to Commander Thatcher, sending him that screenshot.
Nothing urgent. I was just wondering if Juarez had invited you to Ingersoll and Barajas's 998 debrief. That's all. And what did you understand that to mean?
I didn't understand at first. I was asking this individual what debrief, Juarez, like as in what's going on with him? Like what's he organizing? And he goes on to explain celebration.
And you previously identified deputies Ingersoll and Barajas as executioners. Did I understand that portion of your testimony correctly?
Yes, sir.
And let me ask you, if you would, to turn the page in this exhibit. I'll see if I can find out. Since it's in my town, I'd like to know if you can find out. Copy, I'm trying right now. Don't worry if you can't. What did you find out was to be the location of the celebration of a shooting by 2 deputies who were executioners?
I had found out that information given to me that it was going to be at Heroes Sports Bar and Grill in downtown Fullerton.
As an acting captain, would such a celebration of a shooting be of concern to you?
Yes, sir.
Why?
Well, you know, in this particular instance, these deputies, when they came across this vehicle that they were ultimately involved in a shooting with, they had prior knowledge from a day before, that the same vehicle, this vehicle matching the description of a drive-by shooting nearby, a couple blocks over, and resulted in multiple AK-47 rounds being sprayed at a house. They knew this as they were detaining an individual on the street, and this vehicle passed by them. I thought it was concerning that they initiated a pursuit of this vehicle after throwing this detainee in their back seat and driving this detainee in a 2 to 4 minute pursuit as they're taking rounds from an AK-47. I also found it concerning that someone would be celebrating this shooting after a Ricky Starks, a uninvolved bystander civilian, was shot and killed by the AK-47 fire, from what I understand.
Did you bring the fact of this celebration by the executioners to the attention of anybody superior to you in the LASD?
Yes, sir, to Commander Thatcher.
And what was Captain Thatcher's willingness to rein in this behavior?
He essentially told me it shouldn't be a problem, that they couldn't get too rowdy.
And again, when Sheriff Villanueva took office, what happened to Captain Thatcher?
He was promoted to commander.
After you left Compton, were there other officer-involved shootings involving executioners?
After I left Compton as a lieutenant? Yes, sir.
And what do you know about other executioner-involved shootings after you left Compton?
Well, I don't know if they were specifically executioners. I had heard that they were prospects. These were individuals that worked 3000 floor back in the day. And yes, there was a shooting of Andres Cuadrado in June of 2020.
And when you say prospects, what do you mean by that?
From what I understood from deposition of Oscar Berto Gonzalez, that these were individuals that were trying to attain a tattoo from this unlawful clique, this specific one at Compton Station.
Now, Lieutenant, you have filed a lawsuit and a grievance against the County of Los Angeles. Do I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir.
And is one of your complaints that you believe you were blocked for promotion because you stood up to the executioners?
Yes, sir.
And is it your belief that the executioners are being protected by the command staff of the LASD?
Yes, sir.
And does that include the Under Sheriff Murakami and Sheriff Villanueva?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. It's a 22-year veteran of the department, the son of a man who devoted his professional life to the department. How do you feel about working in an organization which tolerates and perhaps rewards gang behavior?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm disheartened. This is a calling for me, a noble cause. My father instituted or instilled in me values that he learned, and I learned also. We're a Catholic family, and I felt that this was it's essentially spitting in the face of, as you actually, sir, mentioned, the majority of these deputies in our department are good individuals who do the right thing. I think that's a slap in the face of that work and that calling.
Thank you for your testimony. I pass the witness.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the ad hoc committee on deputy cliques and gangs?
Yes.
Leo?
First of all, I want to thank you, Lieutenant Walde, for your very insightful and what must be very difficult for you. Your testimony today, it is evident from your voice and your body language that this is not easy and you have a lot of concerns. Understanding that you have filed a complaint, do you have any immediate fear of retaliation to you and your family as a result of your filing of the complaint and of your testifying here?
Yes, rightly so, ma'am. I do. I have seen that individuals such as yourselves have been retaliated against publicly without any fear. And I am actually not external to this department. I'm internal. So I think I'm within closer reach of any type of retaliation, whether it be putting a case on me, initiating an investigation on me for whatever reason that might pop up. And yeah, definitely for my family.
And what about fear of your safety and the safety of your family?
I feel fear because I don't know at what lengths individuals might go. I like to believe that people would not follow orders if they came from the top, to enact any violence against my family. But I mean, it's always a possibility. So it's a fear in the back of my mind. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Me?
Thank you so much for being here today. I might have missed it, but what is your role right now, status in the department?
After I was my opportunity to interview for the position that I was managing for about 10 months as the captain, I wasn't allowed to interview. So I was chosen by a specialized unit, and Mr. Murakami squashed that. He told them to take the number 2, not the number 1, which I was, choice for a specialized unit. So I decided to take care of my body, which was fusion surgery. And when I came back from fusion surgery and after about 1.5 years off, I transferred voluntarily because I didn't want to go back to Compton as a watch commander on the line. So essentially a demotion, but I mean, I love it. I'm making a difference there with the deputies, and I do that as a watch commander on the line on day shift in Marina Del Rey.
Ramon, you had a question?
Thank you again, Lieutenant, for your testimony. A few follow-up questions. I know some of the emails that we've seen reflect back to 2019. Is it your position that still in 2022, the executioners exist?
Yes, these individuals are still in the department. From my understanding, Jaime Juarez and a couple of other ones that were involved in some incidents after I left, specifically a TMZ video with Dalvin Price in Compton. These individuals have been scattered and are awaiting the investigation at Compton regarding deputy cliques. And I have no idea where they're at, other than I know Jaime Juarez is at logistics, handing out equipment. But yes, I mean, they still have a tattoo, and they're still in the department.
And I know we've seen emails about the report, or not emails, we've seen the reports of Mr. Jaime Juarez as far as officer involved shootings, but are there other uses of force that he's been involved in outside of just shootings?
I don't know. I don't have the answer to that. All I've reviewed during the shooting analysis committee when I was the acting captain were those specific shootings that they had reviewed prior to Villanueva taking office. It was a normal process to review these shootings, and usually they would ensure that he stayed indoors. And so after that analysis committee, I reviewed those shootings, and those are the only shootings or use of force that I know that Deputy Juarez was involved in prior to my arrival.
We've heard some testimony about inking parties, these tattoo parties.
Yes, sir.
Do you know if the 998 debriefings, do the inking parties happen at the debriefings, or is that a separate?
I don't have knowledge of how it works. Like I mentioned, I've never been involved in a shooting, and yes, I do have a tattoo, but we never celebrated. Not that I know of. Any of my partners when I was there were involved in shootings, so I don't know how that would work if there was a shooting, if someone's celebrating it, like in this case.
Exhibit 9 with Exhibit 8 with Juarez's truck, his pickup truck, the flag, that is the same as the tattoo on Exhibit 9, correct?
It appears so.
In 28, what does that represent, if you know?
28, that's the number of our stations. Stations are numbered. It's a department's number.
So 28 is for Compton Station?
Yes, sir.
And then Exhibit 13, you listed, I know they're redacted, but in the email to Mr. Thatcher, there, I believe, 9 deputies that are listed that are redacted.
Yes, sir.
Are any of those executioners?
All of them were.
All of them? Okay, thank you.
JP?
Yeah, just for clarification, if you know, when was Thatcher promoted to captain and then commander?
I believe he was promoted to captain in 2016 under McDonald,
Okay.
Sheriff McDonald.
And did he immediately go to Compton Station as captain?
That's what I understood. Yes.
Okay. And then he was promoted to commander.
Approximately, let's see, 3 years later, in 2019, January.
Thank you. I too want to thank you for your testimony. That was very powerful. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The outside of Juarez, are you aware if other executioners have been involved in officer-involved shootings?
Well, we had Deputy Aldama and Deputy Orrego, his partner at the time in 2016, were involved in that shooting with Donta Taylor, who's a Cedar Block Pyru member. And yes, that involved a lawsuit, which resulted in $7 million settlement. And that settlement only occurred, from what I understand, after the county was compelled to release the names of other people in that clique.
Do you know a Deputy Vega or a Deputy Hernandez as part of executioners?
Those, as I mentioned, were, from what I understand, what I heard from deposition from Los Roberto Gonzalez, were prospects. They're currently relieved of duty for an incident prior to the shooting with Andres Guardado, where they were alleged to have, which I believe was settled, kidnap a skateboarder.
Do you know if they're under criminal investigation still?
I don't know. I don't have internal knowledge of that.
Thank you.
Irma?
Thank you for coming up here. I know what impact it may have on your family and you. My question, during the work slowdown, you mentioned that the officers took longer to respond to citizens' calls. But was that information about the work slowdown given to the citizens of Compton? Or did you receive any phone calls from them to say, why is the officer taking X amount of time? And
It normally, we may receive calls. That would be in dispatch would receive those calls. Our policy is if there is going to be a delay that is going to exceed our response times or our mandated response times, depending on the type of call, that we advise them of a delay. But that information wouldn't necessarily reach my level unless something in this, like in this scenario, was a work slowdown and someone was trying to do the right thing and tell me about it. And no, I did not notify the city about it. Personally, it's embarrassing. I did not want to raise any flags. And I was trying to deal with it internally. And when it slowed down, I didn't even further my inquiry because I was relieved, to tell you the truth, that it had stopped. It was essentially mutiny.
I have a question as a longtime member of the department. Can you give us any insight into why the LASD leadership would be protective of a tattooed deputy gang like the Executioners? It doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm wondering if you have any insight to why they would be protected.
Well, I think this is just my personal opinion. I think it boils down to, we're law enforcement, and law enforcement typically doesn't want to be policed. It's a culture within the sheriff's department. And that's how, essentially, without proper management, proper holding deputies accountable, that's how deputies grow to think within this department.
Is there no consideration of the risk they pose to the community if they are allowed to operate unchecked like this?
I believe it's a tribe absolution type of philosophy where you believe the people around you, they're doing the same thing as you are, keeping quiet. You've been forgiven, or at least it's okay to continue to think like that.
Any other?
Let me just follow up on that because I agree that it's very puzzling to me. And I've had the experience of heading several fairly large law enforcement organizations, but why would the leadership of the sheriff's department want to tolerate a situation in which there's shot callers who break the chain of command, let's say from the captain to the lieutenant to the sergeants? I mean, just from that point of view alone, it seems to me that you would want to root this out so that you could effectively implement whatever your policies or goals are as the sheriff or the leadership of the department. I mean, so if you could explain that to me, I'd really appreciate it, Lieutenant Waldy.
Well, I would love to tell you that I completely understand it, sir. In this particular case, I believe that Commander Thatcher, as a captain, had taken care of these individuals, and he had already set his course in terms of ensuring that they controlled the station when he needed them to. And I believe that, I mean, the fact that he went to Arrego's, Deputy Aldama's partner who was terminated, he went to a civil service hearing after Villanueva was elected and tried to get his job back. That says a lot, even after knowing that a lawsuit was filed and that he had lied to and disparaged other law enforcement officers in the city of Orange through an investigation of a DUI arrest. So I believe that Thatcher had already set course. There was no way he was going to reverse course because these were the individuals that Jaime Juarez was sponsoring.
Yeah, but you're talking only about Thatcher, and I'm just saying, I can't conceive of any other law enforcement organization, federal, state, or local, that would tolerate the existence of gangs, cliques, exclusionary subgroups, whatever you want to call them, actually having control over assignments, the plum assignments within a station and the like. I mean, that would be total anathema to anybody, to at least any police chief I've ever known, or head of any law enforcement organization I've ever known. So it's not just Thatcher. This thing so permeates so deeply into the culture of the sheriff's department that apparently nobody over the last 30 to 50 years has actually taken the bull by the horn and said, we've got to get rid of these gangs, these deputy gangs and cliques within the department, and really taken it seriously and done it. And I to the life of me, I understand what you're saying about Thatcher, but I just can't understand why the command staff of Sheriff Villanueva, Murakami, all the people that are currently running the department and have run the department before, why they didn't tackle this and get rid of it. So it has to be something very deeply embedded within the culture of the sheriff's department.
I can tell you now, sir, if I can add to that.
Yep.
My father was on the department. He did not tolerate that. I think he relied on people to deal with it. I know in this current administration, the feeling I get, and I don't know about McDonough. I think he wanted to do the right thing too. But I think it all boils down to the fact that sheriffs are elected, and it's sacrificing public safety for power. And I believe that's essentially what's happening now.
Interesting point,
Thank
for
you.
sure. And by the way, thank you for your testimony, for your candor and for your courage, Lieutenant Waldy.
Thank you, sir.
Seeing no other questions and it being 11 o'clock, I think our very able special counsel deserves a break, and we're all going to take a 15-minute break. We'll resume at 11:16. Thank you. Sorry.
Please, sir, put down your, please. Has to be
I'll come see you in just a minute. Okay, call-in user, if we could do your audio check. Everyone is tuned in, so please say one short sentence. Go ahead now. And be sure that you unmute yourself. Call-in user, please press *3 on your phone to be unmuted again. Okay, call-in user audio check. Please go ahead.
Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Excellent. Please be sure that you speak loud and very slow. Do not mute yourself at this time, but your mic is live, so leave everything as is. And Chair Kennedy, we are ready to resume from the break.
We're just waiting on a couple commissioners.
This will be a little odd. I'm not sure. It's like the Wizard of Oz.
Mr. Dexter, whenever you're ready.
Yes, I would like to call our next witness who has agreed to testify, but only anonymously. So we won't see his or her face, nor will we see his or her actual voice. The witness will be speaking through a voice distorter. So if I might just ask the witness to indicate that you can hear us now.
Yes.
Before we begin, can
Yes.
we, I guess we'll just do it this way. Anonymous witness, can you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead.
Are you a current LASD employee?
Yes.
And where are you stationed?
East LA Station.
And have you been an LASD employee more than 5 years?
Yes.
And why have you requested to testify anonymously?
The fear of retribution or retaliation.
Tell us, if you will, why you first decided to work for the LASD.
I believe it was my calling in life to help other people out.
Are you familiar with the term shot caller as it's understood within the department? And what is a shot caller at the East LA station?
That is a deputy who has a certain amount of power at the station.
Are there shot callers currently in the East LA station?
Yes.
And who are the current shot callers at the East LA station?
Miguel Ortiz and Luis Valle.
Are you familiar with a Rene Munoz?
Yes,
And was Renee Munoz a shot caller in East LA?
yes.
In the East LA station currently, what authority or responsibility does a shot caller hold?
They have influence over the schedule, what deputies can work, spots that are considered coveted, and which deputies who are shunned.
In East LA, are more patrol areas more desirable than others?
The north end, yes. That be the East LA.
And why is the north end more desirable for a deputy than other portions of the East LA station coverage?
In East LA area, the deputies will have a partner with them. You work as a two-man car. In the south end, Commerce, Maywood, Cudahy, deputies work by themselves in single-man cars. It is desirable to have a partner in the car.
Does the scheduling deputy have the power to assign deputies to desirable or undesirable locations?
Yes,
Is Luis Valle a bandito?
yes,
Is Miguel Ortiz a bandito?
yes,
Is Rene Munoz a bandito?
yes.
How do you know that they are banditos?
Common knowledge throughout the station.
And how long have you been aware of the fact that Luis Valle and Miguel Ortiz are banditos?
For a while, more than a couple of years.
Are there other banditos currently at the East LA station other than Deputy Valle and Deputy Ortiz?
Yes,
And about how many banditos are there in East LA currently?
between 12 and 15.
And how do you know that?
Common knowledge at the station.
What positions do these banditos hold in the East LA station currently?
Usually, detectives at the station are TOs, which are training officers.
And is being a training officer a desirable position in the East LA station?
Yes,
And why is that?
it's a covenant testing spot where you get a pay increase for training a deputy.
You get a pay increase for being a TO,
Correct.
and that's a determination made by the shot caller in the East LA station?
Yes.
What's the level of influence of the banditos in East LA currently?
They decide which deputies are considered BO, which means a deputy who's not considered up to the job. Those people will be shunned, or they'll have their reputation demolished or slashed, or they'll say that a deputy is a good dude and that person is actually welcome into the fold.
In connection with becoming a TO, do you know of examples of people who scored highly on the TO position test and were passed over because of the instruction of the banditos in East LA?
Yes.
Would you please tell the commission about that experience?
A deputy scored very high on the training officer test and was told that that deputy was BO, and they would not allow that person to be a training officer at the station. So a character assassination was ordered to make this person look incompetent. And so they could pass that person up and put either a bandito or a bandito associate in that TO place.
Now, was there a captain in the East LA station who was responsible for the administration of that station?
Yes.
And who was the captain in LA responsible, in East LA, responsible for the growth or the continuance of the Banditos?
Rick Mejia.
Richard Mejia. Is Richard Mejia still the captain in East LA?
No.
What rank does Captain Mejia now hold, if you know?
Commander.
Was
I believe
Richard,
it's commander.
was Richard Mejia promoted by Sheriff Villanueva from captain to commander?
Yes.
During your experience at the East LA station, are the Banditos controlled by the captain?
No.
How do the Banditos get to exercise the control that they have in the East LA station currently?
Usually it's by playing games like softball or other sporting events with the Banditos or the associates. The captain at the time would befriend the Banditos, and they would use their friendship with the captain to get the things they want.
Sheriff Villanueva has spoken of his effort to clean up East LA by bringing in a strong captain. First, do you understand what a strong captain means within the context
Yes.
of the department?
Yes.
What is a strong captain?
A leader within the station, a person with integrity who will lead the deputies and instruct them and mentor.
Was Richard Mejia, now Commander Mejia, a strong captain in the East LA station?
No.
Was the fact that he was not a strong captain widely perceived in the East LA station?
Yes.
And why was he not considered a strong captain during the time he was at the East LA station?
He was easily manipulated by the Banditos and seemed focused on making friends with the deputies.
I'm sorry, he befriended the deputies, and what else did he do? It was a little hard to understand what you said.
He befriended the Banditos, and it appeared his focus was to become friends with the deputies and to be a part of their of the clique.
Are the Banditos in East LA currently composed of a particular ethnic group?
Yes.
And do the Banditos have a tattoo?
Yes.
Are there women who are members of the Banditos?
No.
What ethnic group are the Banditos currently in East LA?
Hispanic.
Are there African American Bandito members?
No.
Have you experienced examples of the Banditos while at work engage in conduct that you believed was contrary to fundamental principles of professional policing?
Yes.
Could you please share with the commission what you have observed that constituted what you believe are those violations?
In one incident, there was a deputy involved shooting where the suspect was caught, And two deputies were told to transport the suspect. A use of force, I believe, happened after the person was caught. Two deputies were told to transport that person to the hospital after the use of force. The two deputies were sidetracked while they were en route to the hospital, stopped the car, physically assaulted the suspect, put him back in the car, and then took him to the hospital.
And was that an incident which was known or should have been known by the captain and other authorities in the East LA station at the time?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, did it go to Captain Mejia or others who were captains or in positions of authority at the time?
Yes.
And do you know what actions were taken in connection with this, taking a prisoner out of a car, beating him up, and then taking him to the hospital?
I believe an internal affair investigation was opened.
And do you know whether those deputies remain deputies in East LA?
They're still at East LA.
Have you had experience in which one deputy pointed a gun at another deputy in a locker room?
Yes.
Could you describe for the commission's benefit that incident?
There was a deputy at East LA station, which some of the deputies did not like. They perceived him to be, we use the term 5150. They did not like this person for whatever reason. And there was an incident in the locker room, the male locker room, where a deputy told the deputy that the victim deputy that he needed to wait his turn. And I don't know what that was about. An argument ensued, and one deputy pointed his gun at the other deputy's head.
And that occurred in the locker room. Were there other deputies who witnessed it?
Yes.
And was that the kind of behavior that you would have expected would have been observed or reported to by the captain at East LA?
Yes.
Is turning a gun on a fellow deputy consistent with good police practices?
No.
Do you know whether the deputy who pointed the gun at his colleague in the locker room was disciplined?
No.
You know whether that deputy was a bandito?
He was a Bandito associate.
And what do you mean by a bandito associate?
A Bandito associate is a person or deputy who is next in line to becoming a Bandito.
And are bandito associates people that can be identified by those of the deputies who are in the East LA station currently? That is, do you have an idea of who these associates are?
Yes.
And the fact that these associates are identifiable by other deputies, is that something which is knowable by the captain of the station?
Yes.
Have you observed that people who do not do as directed by banditos are made outcasts at the station?
Yes.
Could you describe some of the ways that these people are outcast?
Usually, Banditos, the associates, or even some people who are training staff, training deputies, they will turn their back to that person in the hallway or in the report writing room. So when that person walks in the room, everyone turns their back to them.
Now, is the fact of a person walking into a room and having his or her colleagues turn their back something that is observable by anybody who is in the hallway?
Yes,
Is that something that a captain of a station should be aware of?
yes,
Is directing that sort of behavior to a colleague, deputy sheriff, consistent with good police practices?
can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Is turning your back on a colleague in this fashion to show disrespect consistent with good police practices?
No,
Have you observed that deputies refuse to provide backup when called to do so by disfavored colleagues?
yes,
Can you provide an example for the commissioners?
yes. A deputy who used to work at the station was involved in the shooting. The deputies did not like this particular deputy because they believed that he was an undercover FBI agent. He was involved in the shooting, and the deputies put the word out that it was a fake shooting and the deputy was no good.
And what followed from that situation?
The word was put out not to back that person up, that he was no good.
And were there
Stay
incidents?
away from that person.
I'm sorry. Were there?
And to stay away from that person.
It's a little harder than it is when you're sitting in the room. Were there instances in which you were aware that the deputy sought backup and it was refused?
Yes,
And do you have in mind any two deputies in particular who were involved in that refusal to attend to a call from a colleague?
at this time, the names, no. It was just station knowledge that it happened.
Have you observed that the Banditos have directed work slowdowns when they were in disagreement with their superiors?
Yes,
And when is the last time that there was a work slowdown, to your knowledge, because of a disagreement with superiors in the East LA station?
last summer.
And could you briefly describe those circumstances?
Deputies believe they were getting disciplined unfairly by the captain or the sheriff, and the Banditos called for a work slowdown.
And was that slowdown effective?
For the deputies, yes.
And how did it evidence itself that there was a slowdown in the East LA station last year?
The arrest at the station dropped. No one was actually taking anyone to jail, and it raised a lot of red flags.
Let me ask you about a physical danger that you may be familiar with. Have you learned of a practice of Banditos loosening lug nuts on cars with the goal of putting at risk the safety of a disfavored deputy?
I've heard about that at the station, yes.
And how recently has that information come to your attention?
Within the past month or so.
What is a jacket within the meaning of the term as it's used in the LASD?
A jacket is a false
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't hear it. I didn't quite understand.
A jacket is a false report of a deputy when you go to a new station, it's a reputation, a false or negative reputation that follows you to the next assignment. When you go to the next assignment, people will believe you are no good.
And have you heard that the Banditos engage in the creation of jackets of deputy sheriffs who are transferring?
Yes.
And can you think of any specific examples that you know about?
Yes. A deputy was sent to Compton Station. A jacket was put on that deputy at Compton Station and also Century Station. The deputy was put on his way to work. He had a negative encounter with a Century deputy that he didn't know, who knew everything about him.
Are you familiar with the deputy Christina Smith?
Yes.
And did Christina Smith have a jacket placed upon her?
Yes.
And would you describe the circumstances surrounding Christina Smith?
Her jacket was that she was BO, no good, an officer safety issue, and it would spread to her new assignment. This is the person that they were getting.
Are you familiar with the circumstances surrounding Deputy Matthew Hernandez and his receiving a jacket? Would you describe for the commissioners, please, that circumstance?
His jacket was, he was 5150, which means mentally ill, and he was a liar.
Are you familiar with the circumstance involving Ed Hernandez?
Yes.
And would you share with the commissioners the circumstances of Ed Hernandez getting a jacket?
His was, he was no good, not a team player, and you need to watch him.
How is it that in a paramilitary structured organization that deputy sheriffs get to establish the policies and enforce the policies at East LA Station currently?
Lack of leadership from the superiors.
And who's to blame for that lack of leadership?
The captain.
And how would you, I'm sorry, please continue.
The captain and whoever placed the captain there.
Were you familiar with the persons transferred from East Los Angeles at the commencement of Sheriff Villanueva's tenure as the sheriff of Los Angeles County?
Yes.
And how did you obtain that familiarity?
Just station knowledge.
How many Banditos were transferred from the sheriff when he took office, by the sheriff when he took office in 2018?
Transferred or left the station?
Well, start with transferred and then we'll talk about left the station.
0.
And what about left the station? How many left the station?
Over 30.
And were the people who left the station voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave?
Voluntarily.
I'm sorry, you said voluntarily?
Voluntarily.
Yes. Was there anything about the transfer of these 30 or so people which cleaned up the Banditos problem in East LA?
No,
As a current employee of the LASD stationed in East LA, what do you believe the commission should recommend as the means to end the dominance of the Banditos at that station?
placement of strong leadership at the station and the removal of all banditos.
Is there anything else?
No,
Would the strong leadership that you described be entirely new leadership, or would it just be to bring in another captain with the same group of people at the East LA station?
a whole new group of administrative staff.
A whole new administrative staff, you said?
Yes,
Let me close by asking you, in light of what you've experienced, why do you wish to remain an LASD employee?
this was my call. This job is what I was made to do. And I'm going to do it no matter what.
I have no further questions. I pass the witness.
Thank you. Rob?
I wonder if I could ask the witness, first of all, you described the term Banditos and Banditos associates. Are the Banditos associates, are they inked, or is it only Banditos that are inked?
Associates are not inked. Only the banditos are inked.
All right, so can you estimate approximately how many Bandito associates there are in the East LA station?
I would say between 10 and 15.
So about the same number of associates as there are Banditos currently, is that accurate?
Yes.
And when was if you know, and I'll take hearsay here, but when was the last inking of a Bandito, to your knowledge, at the East LA station?
Roughly a year and a half ago, 18 months ago.
And do you know how many deputies were inked as Banditos back a year and a half ago? Roughly
10.
10?
10.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Lael?
Thank you for your testimony. If Captain, now Commander Mejia, told members of this commission last year that there are no longer any Banditos at East LA Station, is that not truthful?
That is not truthful.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I think that's, well, come on.
I don't know if this was testified to, but is Commander Mejia a Bandito?
No.
And do you know how someone becomes a shot caller?
Every station has different ways of getting a shot caller. Sometimes it's just that person who is well liked by the group.
Is there a requirement that a shot caller has been involved in a officer involved shooting?
Requirement? No.
What about
But it
expectation?
happens often.
What about an expectation that they've been involved in an officer involved shooting?
Yes.
Thank you.
Patty?
Thank you for your testimony. A technical question, how many deputies are stationed at the East LA station?
I do not know. I don't know, maybe over 100.
Okay. And is it, can one be a shot caller without being a bandito or have another tattoo?
No, a person who is a standalone, who is strong, is usually frowned upon, and they'll get a jacket.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Mr. Deichler, your next witness?
Yes. Thank you for your testimony, sir, or ma'am. Eli Vera. I believe he's in the witness room. May I go find him?
We have someone coming.
Yeah, okay.
Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Would you state your name for the record, sir, and spell your last name?
Yes, my complete name is Elizer Vera, Vera.
And sir, are you employed?
I am retired as of March 30th.
And until your retirement, what was your profession, sir?
33 and a half years in the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department.
And what was the highest rank you achieved in your 34 years at the LASD?
I was a division chief.
And would you share with the commissioners briefly your history over the 34 years in the LASD?
Yes, I was hired in 1988. I initially worked at Men's Central Jail. I worked our gang detail inside the jail. I went on to work our special investigation unit on loan to the DEA task force. I worked patrol at Linwood Station and at Sentry Station from 1992 to 2001. I served as a patrol deputy, training officer, and a detective at the station. I was promoted to detective division, worked on our Cargo Cats criminal apprehension team. I promoted to sergeant in late 2001, where I worked patrol at Lenox Station as a patrol sergeant, then later as a crime impact team sergeant. I worked as a crime impact team sergeant at Compton. I worked in the executive office, the office of the sheriff, for about 2+ years. I was a lieutenant at Sentry Station as watch commander. I was a SWAT commander for the Sheriff's Department at our SEB Special Enforcement Bureau for a number of years. I promoted to captain of South Los Angeles Station for about 1.5 years. I was a captain of our Reserve Forces Bureau, of our Communications and Fleet Management Bureau. I was a commander at Court Services and a chief in Central Patrol Division and Technology and Support Division.
Well, that's a full life in the department. Thank you for your service. On October 7th, 2020, Sheriff Villanueva conducted a social media public statement about his actions at East LA. And let me play a portion of that for you, exhibit numbered 21.
2018, the very first thing I did before I even sworn in publicly was I went to East LA Station and I relieved of command of the captain of East LA Station for failing to do his job. That was my very first act in office. And that is very significant. And from there, we transferred out 36 individuals. Some of them were near retirement, or we convinced them to move on to greener pastures. But 36 people, the entire leadership of East LA Station was turned over. And that was on purpose because they had failed in their job to lead the station. And then the criminal investigation that had been started by my predecessor, I continued it. And this thing was delivered to the district attorney's office in around, I think, June or July of 2019. And they did a good job. They interviewed all the parties involved. They interviewed all the.
We've heard about the quality of the investigation, but let me ask you about the allegation offered by the sheriff that he transferred 36 people. Are you familiar with the facts which underlay that statement?
I am.
And how did you gain your familiarity with that?
I actually was the person that was responsible for creating a process to move forward to try to change the culture in the station. It was a multifaceted approach. Partially was part one was transferring people from the station so we could start to change the culture. It would also include changing training officers. So you would have a different set of training officers that would train the new deputies coming to the station. And then it also involved changing out the supervision to bring strong supervision at the station level from sergeant all the way up to captain.
And did that multifaceted approach actually take place?
It did not.
What about this suggestion of the 36 people who were transferred? Were those the leaders and the banditos who were occupying East LA?
It was not.
Who were the 36 people who were transferred?
These were a group of deputy sheriffs that some were transferred, some promoted, some retired, some were, received other assignments in the organization. None of those transfers were forceful transfers. They all occurred voluntarily. There's actually an email chain that corroborates the fact that these individuals decided to leave voluntarily from the station, and they sent those emails through the chain of command to make sure that everyone knew very clearly that this was as a result of movement voluntarily as opposed to forced transfers.
And is the statement that 36 people were transferred or a statement that banditos were transferred a true or a false statement?
That's false.
Who is Ernest Chavez?
Ernest Chavez is a commander on the sheriff's department and was the former captain of East LA Station.
And are you familiar with Ernest Chavez's testimony under oath on March 8th, 2021 in the case of Hernandez et al. Versus the County of Los Angeles, in which he was questioned about a statement he had made to a reporter for the Los Angeles Times? Let me read it to you to see if it refreshes your memory. Question: Sheriff claims he transferred from the station 36 people who were associated with the banditos or were otherwise identified as problematic. Answer: you told the reporter that, just as you testified today, that the 36 transfers were simply a general group of deputies that left the station. Correct? Answer: yes, sir. Do you agree with the sworn testimony of now Commander Chavez that the 36 people were not involuntarily transferred and were just a group of deputies who generally left the station?
Yes, sir.
In the statement that we've heard that Sheriff Villanueva made to the public, did you have the opportunity to discuss with him and the undersheriff the truth or falsity of that statement?
I did, each individually.
Would you first start by telling us what you discussed with Undersheriff Murakami?
I told the undersheriff that the statements that the sheriff had made on that occasion and several other occasions following that were not accurate. They were false. There had been no forceful transfers. I explained to him that he had been part of the process from the onset. He being the undersheriff, he knew very well that it was part of a voluntary transfer process that we were in, and that the evidence would show, clearly that that did not occur. There were no grievances that were filed by the employees as a result of being forcefully transferred. Not a single one, which would have been an impossibility if you were forcefully removing people from the station.
And what did the undersheriff say in response?
He acknowledged it. He knew that the sheriff was using this statement to make it appear to the public that he had essentially handled the issue and transferred the Banditos out of the station.
Did you have the opportunity to discuss that same topic with Sheriff Villanueva yourself?
I did.
And would you share with the commissioners that conversation?
It was very similar to what we just discussed. He was aware of the process from the onset that we were going to start by transferring individuals from the station. He was aware because we had this personal conversation and in a group as well, talking about the appropriate administrative and if necessary, criminal investigations that needed to occur during the same time period. And I reminded him very clearly that this was a voluntary process and that he was aware that it was a voluntary process because procedurally in the sheriff's department, you can't move people out of what we call breakup, which is the organized transfer process, without receiving approval up the chain of command. And it has to be orchestrated because if you're moving, let's say 6 or 7 individuals in a short period of time, now you leave the station in a vacuum where it doesn't have enough personnel to do the job. So you had to have support from the entire upper chain of command. And I told him that I knew that he was doing this because it was good for PR, but it was completely false and he needed to stop.
As of the time that the sheriff assumed his position on December 3rd, 2018, was it perceived in the department among its leadership that East LA was a station with problems related to tattooed deputies and cultural issues?
Yes, sir.
Was that a problem that was a secret in the LASD?
Absolutely not.
At the time of his inauguration, do you believe the sheriff contributed to enhancing the problematic East LA culture?
I do.
Would you describe what you observed at his swearing in on that occasion on December 3rd, 2018?
What I saw was something that I found very disturbing, and not just something that I found disturbing. There were several other executives in the organization that made the same observations that I did. Day one for a swearing in ceremony, there was the front of the auditorium had been reserved for the East LA station. And the problem with that is you are now the sheriff of Los Angeles County. So that means you are the sheriff to everyone in the county of Los Angeles and to the entire organization. And to section off the front of the auditorium for the purposes of highlighting a particular station signals to the rest of the organization right from the onset that East LA station is going to hold a very special place in how I conduct business in my heart in the organization, whatever the case is. But as a professional law enforcement officer, that is a very, very bad signal for the organization internally.
Do you know whether the sheriff after that took steps to reintroduce the Fort Apache logo at the station?
He did.
And what was your view of reintroducing the Fort Apache logo at a station which was populated with Banditos?
The department was trying to move in a different direction, professionalizing the organization and getting rid of problematic emblems or offensive emblems and things of that nature. So there were a host of issues with that. Part of it was it said Fort Apache. You know, another thing about it was always a kick in the pants. So it was a problematic gesture that kind of re-emphasized that East LA was going to be treated a little differently.
Let me ask you, do you know whether this decision was influenced in some way by one of the sheriff's family members?
It was.
And what family member do you believe influenced that decision?
A family member was specifically his wife, Vivian Villanueva, and department member eventual department member again was Danny Batanero.
Who's Danny Batanero?
Danny Batanero is a retired or was a retired sergeant from the sheriff's department that was a friend of the sheriff. He's actually the person that the sheriff wanted to make the captain of East LA Station when he was initially sworn in. He wanted to bring back this retired sergeant from that was from East LA and make him a captain, and that's who he wanted to be the captain of the station.
So let me ask you first, is it possible to bring a retired sergeant back and make him a captain under the civil service rules as they then applied?
Absolutely not.
And was there any historic baggage that former Sergeant Batanero carried with him with regard to his background?
We didn't know factually, but the perception that was common knowledge internally in the organization was he was involved with the origination of the Banditos.
So let me see if I can understand that. It was the sheriff's desire to bring back as a captain a retired sergeant, which would have been contrary to the civil service rules, with the wide perception that he had been involved in the Banditos. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, sir. As a matter of fact, there's a memorandum that was authored and signed by the sheriff that stated clearly that the sheriff had intended to bring back Mr. Batanero to the sheriff's department, reinstate him, and then assign him to East LA Station.
We were on the subject matter of the sheriff's wife's involvement in at least the decision regarding the Ford Apache logo. How do you know about that?
It was discussed in a meeting, at least in my presence, in the sheriff's conference room where Mr. Batanero and Vivian Villanueva had consulted members of the Apache Nation, allegedly, and they claimed that they were not offended by that title or by that phrase. And that was the argument as to why they wanted to keep that statement on the station pin.
So it was reported that Mrs. Villanueva had investigated with representatives of the Apache Nation to determine whether referring to the East LA Station or using the Ford Apache logo, including the words and the picture kick in the ass, was approved by the Apache Nation. Was that the substance of it?
Yes, sir, essentially.
Yeah. Was at the time was the sheriff's wife an employee of the LASD?
No, she's a retired deputy.
Do you know whether Mrs. Villanueva has been involved in approving or determining promotions and transfers since her husband became the sheriff of the department?
She has.
How do you know that?
I was in the room.
Would you describe for the commissioners, please, what you saw and observed on that occasion?
So early in his administration, we were considering the promotions of lieutenants to captain. It was in his conference room, which is adjacent to his main office. And during the course of the discussion of various lieutenants that were being considered for promotion, the sheriff got up multiple times and stepped into his office and got on his phone and was making calls. At that point, I suspect later that same day, he was sitting at the head of the table. We were on break. We were still discussing a particular employee. And he called her directly, called her by her name, discussed the employee, and gave us a thumbs down and shook his head. And he was not promoted.
Let me ask you, in your, was it 34 years?
Yes.
34 years of service to the LASD, have you had other experiences in which non-employee spouses of senior executives of the department have opined on hiring decisions?
Absolutely not.
Was this unusual in your experience?
Absolutely.
Why did you want to change the culture in the East LA station?
It wasn't just the East LA station. It's the culture across the board in the department. In my opinion, we can't take step one in rebuilding. I'm not going to say public trust because we're so far away from public trust that that's not even a conversation right now. It's public confidence. And as long as that we have secret societies operating within the sheriff's department, station tattoos, cliques, whatever you may want to call it, we will never be able to take step one in trying to regain the confidence of the community. So the practice needed to come to an end. And it had to be much deeper than just policies. It's a cultural change and a much deeper dive. So for me, when the sheriff came into office, I found that as the most critical issue for the organization to be able to start to heal and regain public trust or confidence.
Let me ask you a question, cultural question, and some observations. Is one way that the culture is expressed by the way people, sheriff, deputies, talk to each other on the radio?
Yes.
And would you talk a little bit about what your observation was about the use of the radio in connection with recent times in the department?
In my previous assignment, I was the commanding officer of our Communications and Fleet Management Bureau. So that is your dispatch center. 911 calls get routed to the station, then they go to a central location that where the emergent and priority calls are dispatched. So I would constantly monitor the radio because of the position I held. And what I heard in East LA was very troubling, is a lot of references to deputies by monikers, by nicknames, things of that nature that were very unprofessional and unsettling to hear.
Monikers like used by gangs?
Some, yes.
I understood that under the ordinary circumstances, you would have been the person ultimately responsible for supervising the investigation of the Kennedy Hall incident, but a physical problem prevented you from doing that, I guess, an operation of some sort. Did it come to your attention when you returned from your surgery that the investigation had been criticized?
Yes.
And how did it come to your attention?
Initially heard about the Inspector General's report, and then I read the Inspector General's report, which was very concerning when I saw the shortcomings in the investigation and the lack of depth of the investigation.
Did you yourself have the opportunity to interview a deputy who described to you treatment received by that deputy at the hands of the Banditos?
Yes, earlier in my career, yes.
Would you describe that?
That particular deputy had experienced some retaliation, not being backed up on calls, being shunned because the station was, or the leadership in the station was looking to make this person a training officer. Just a very unprofessional, unbecoming environment of harassment to this particular employee. The particular employee had to leave the station and at one point came to interview me with me. I had never met the person before, but she described some very troubling situations. So I had a position that I placed her on to remove her from that environment so that she could work in a professional environment, in a safe environment.
That was a person who transferred because he or she felt endangered and harassed in her workplace. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And was it unusual for you to hear stories about the East LA station and other stations in which there were patterns of harassment?
directly as the captain, because my position wasn't, working in a patrol environment anymore. I wasn't hearing this directly. I would hear rumors at times, but it was unusual to actually have an employee come to you and tell you some circumstances that I found very concerning.
I understand that you are a candidate for sheriff of Los Angeles County. Do I have that correct?
I am, sir.
And once you announced your candidacy for sheriff, did you or your family face any retaliation?
Unfortunately, I did.
And what position did you hold on the day that you announced that you were a candidate?
I was a division chief.
And did that position change?
It did.
What happened to change that position?
I was eventually demoted to the rank of commander.
And what was the explanation that was offered, if any?
The explanation was that I was running for sheriff.
And have you, or I understand your wife is or has been employed by the LASD?
My wife, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
And what position does she hold in the LASD?
She's been retired for a little over a year.
When did you announce your candidacy?
April of last year.
So a little over a year ago?
Yeah, she had been retired for about a month or so when I announced my candidacy.
Were you or your wife subject to an internal investigation after you announced your candidacy?
Threats of internal investigations, inquiries, unannounced visits by law enforcement or sheriff's department investigators that came to my property.
You have a son who is interested in becoming a deputy sheriff in the LASD?
I do.
And was your son's application determined that he was qualified for the position?
He was.
And what happened to that application?
After he received a conditional offer of employment, like his brother and sister who were on the job, and he was bypassed a number of times for the position of deputy sheriff and on several academy classes to the extent that he had to apply with another agency. And in speaking to the background investigator that completed his background from the other agency, they read his file, and clearly on his file, it stated that he had been cleared for academy, cleared for hire. But that did not happen as a result of my announcement for my candidacy for the sheriff of Los Angeles County.
I have no further questions. I pass the witness.
Any questions?
I just have, it's not a question, but I do want to just state for the record that we would very much have liked to have had Sheriff Villanueva here to testify today and respond to questions. You can see why, I think, just from what's happened so far. The record of this hearing should reflect that on behalf of the commission, the special counsel to the Civilian Oversight Commission, Mr. Dykster, invited Sheriff Villanueva to this very hearing by letter dated May 6, 2022, in which he said, and I'm just quoting from the letter, on May 24th, 2022 at Loyola Law School in the Robinson courtroom, the commission will conduct an evidentiary hearing addressing certain information relating to the subjects described above, to include the existence, operation, and impact of deputy gangs, cliques, and exclusionary subgroups within the LASD. I anticipate there will be testimony about deputy subgroups known as the Banditos and executioners. Please accept my invitation to the commission's hearing on May 24th. This letter from Mr. Dykster was responded to on May 16th, 2022 by a Lieutenant O'Donnell, who's in the office of the sheriff, who says, and I'll just quote the pertinent part of the letter of May 16th. Unfortunately, Sheriff Alex Villanueva will not be able to attend the hearing on May 24th, 2022. End quote. And I just want to say, yes, Sheriff Villanueva, it is unfortunate that you're not here. I have no question though of the witness.
Leo?
Thank you, Chief Era, for your testimony. You've talked about the knowledge that you have about East LA Station and your proposal or you're being responsible for process for changing the culture of the station. We've had testimony and there have been numerous reports in the media about deputy gangs at stations other than East LA. Do you have any firsthand knowledge or experience about deputy gangs at stations other than East LA?
The Sheriff's Department has long embraced a culture of, and this is the background as opposed to a justification of tattoos that identify certain stations. And my understanding from 34 years on the department comes from typical or military type of practices. So the majority of the stations in the Sheriff's Department at some point or currently, and I don't know about currently, have had various tattoos that identify stations. Certain stations have had individuals who have been terminated, severely disciplined, and some prosecuted with criminal behavior. So whether some of it has definitely been consistent with that criminal behavior that we're discussing, and some of it many of them have never had an issue with the department, but I think the bigger issue is the fact that the practice needs to be completely terminated, and the culture has to change, because just the existence of these secret societies, I think are extremely problematic, not only to the department but to the community. And like I stated earlier, you will never be able to gain any semblance of public confidence as long as this practice is occurring. And the only one that can change the practice is the sheriff. The sheriff is the one that's responsible for, at the end of the day, using the resources that are available to him in collaboration with county council, with the inspector general, with the COC, to come together and figure out, okay, how do we put a permanent end to this process? Not just policy, because the biggest fear that I have in my 33 and a half years is that you just change the policy. If you change the policy, you drive bad practices underground. And that's something that we cannot afford in the Sheriff's Department. It has to be a much deeper look into it, with the policy being changed, culture being changed, and quite frankly, a look at employees that have participated in rogue behavior and been terminated or prosecuted, and a look as to what changed, what caused this type of behavior, so we can have a permanent end to the practice, and then with a strong leadership that doesn't allow for it, because you get what you allow for. And one of the things I'm most proud of, when I was the captain of South Los Angeles, there's a tattoo associated with the station, but there wasn't a single lawsuit or incident that was problematic that came up during that time period, because we just didn't allow for bad behavior. But it can't be dealt with at that level. It has to be dealt with at a much higher level at the top of the organization in a collaborative manner.
Thank you very much.
Could I just ask, though, with respect to station tattoos as opposed to deputy gangs and cliques and subgroup, exclusionary subgroup, but a station tattoo, would that exclude people, deputies, from having that tattoo? I mean, in other words, were those exclusionary tattoos, or could you just get one because you were a deputy assigned to that station?
The majority of the time, you have to be asked by those involved in that group.
Yeah.
if they want to participate or whatever.
Well,
the
why would
case
that
is.
be, sir? I would just want to, I want to know, why would that be? That if I'm a member of a certain station that's identified by a tattoo, I've got to get permission from other line deputies to be able to have a station tattoo. Why would that be?
That's
Please
be-
explain it to me.
Sure. That's because whoever is responsible for those station tattoos as a group of individuals that have received those tattoos, who've created their own guidelines as to why they believe that, you know, a particular deputy sheriff should be allowed to be part of that group. And amongst themselves, they determine who fits that criteria or does not, and then allows them, you know, to participate. The majority, I can tell you this, the majority, you know, to qualify it. I worked Linwood Station, I worked Century Station, I worked Compton Station, I worked Lenox Station, I worked South LA, and I worked SEB. I don't have a tattoo on my body. The majority of the people that work those stations do not have tattoos, but the great majority. But there is a group of people that run those particular cliques or subgroups, whatever the case is. And we have seen the behavior of some of those groups become abusive and at some cases criminal.
But let's not call them station tattoos then, because they're not available to everybody at the station. Let's call them deputy gang or clique tattoos, but let's not call them station tattoos because they are not that. You know, what disturbs me a little bit too, I must say, Commander, is the temporizing view you have of deputy cliques and gangs, whatever you call these, that you have these exclusionary subgroups and you're excusing them by, oh, well, it could be okay to have this where there's a shot caller or a small group of deputies within a station who controls who can be in and who's out, who gets the TOs, the training officer assignments, who gets the plum assignments. I mean, this is, to me, it's total anathema. And it's a cancer on the sheriff's department that this continues to exist. And it's going to take some really, really strong leadership to change it. And I don't hear that from you, sir.
I think you misunderstood my answer. You were asking me, sir, a question as to how it operates. I wasn't telling you that I stand with that. I actually, as a matter of fact, I was the person that volunteered to take on this issue when the sheriff was elected to put a permanent end to it. My response to your question, it was simply, you know, how does this operate? And that was my explanation, not a condoning of it. And I haven't condoned it. And I've been very public in my position throughout. So I believe you misunderstood.
Okay, by whatever name, deputy cliques, gangs, exclusionary subgroups, you think that it would be a good thing if the sheriff's department at long last got rid of them?
Absolutely. I'm the only executive in the sheriff's department has spoken to over 500 deputy sheriffs personally in formalized training as before we even started to address it and how we're going to put an end. We need to put an end to this practice because of the problem and the distrust that it's causing in the community. So my position has been very, very pointed, and I don't know how you misunderstood.
Okay, well, I haven't been following your campaign, sir, but how would you end it? So how would you end deputy cliques, gangs? How are you going to end it? Let's say you're.
How am I going to end it?
Yeah.
Very simple. And I spoke just a little bit earlier. Number one, we're going to create a policy day one that puts an end to the practice altogether. My intentions would be to bring in representatives from the COC, the Inspector General, County Council, and even the unions with a very clear statement as to what the end game will be. The end game will be, we'll put an end to the practice. Number two, we'll put an end to the culture. And the culture will start from how we hire individuals, how we train individuals, the explanation as to this is what this whole tattoo culture has evolved to, what has cost the organization. We don't stand with it. It's a complete change of culture. And then the deeper dive that I discussed earlier is creating, whether it's a task force or a blue ribbon committee, that at the same time does the deeper dive, because what I really want to get down to is that rogue behavior. So the rogue behavior from deputies that are hired that have a background that they clear backgrounds clearly, now they end up becoming involved in either criminal activity or in abusive activity that leads to high level discipline. And if you can get an entity of stakeholders, educators, things of that nature to do the deeper dive into what has caused these issues, I think now you've attacked the issue from different levels, and you can put a permanent end to the process. But it's much greater than just creating a policy.
Well, you have a commission, whether it's a blue ribbon one or not, but you have a commission that is right now, this commission is doing a deeper dive. We're going to do that much. But thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vera.
Okay, we do need to take public comments. Are there any other questions? Yes, Patty?
Mr. Vera, thanks for being here today. What, in your over 30 years with the department, have you ever heard of anyone, any deputy who had a tattoo, change their mind or decided to have the tattoo removed? Has there ever been any scenario like that?
Yes.
Once, twice? What's your sense?
I have a sense that there has been a good amount of older deputies who have looked back and realized that that may not have been the best decision. Maybe at the time, things weren't the same as they were today. And some of them have gotten them lasered off. Some of them have covered them over. Most of them are retired, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Also, I want to say thank you for being here. You mentioned that you spoke with the sheriff
Yes.
about the misleading of the information about the transfers being voluntary. But how did he respond to you in that meeting? What did he say to you about it?
So if you know, I've been around him long enough, his responses are kind of unique. There's not a whole lot of back and forth. There's a lot of hand wringing. There's a whole lot of shaking back and forth and a whole lot of that kind of thing, and no real response. So when I actually, I was forceful with him on quite a few issues right from the onset that I found problematic, and you never got a consistent answer from him. It was more of just him kind of grinding his teeth and listening to what you have to say, and then we would hear about it later through an undersheriff or an assistant sheriff. But you didn't get a whole lot out of him.
Okay, thank you.
And I told him point blank, that's not true. It's a false statement.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I think we'll move over to public comments. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, without objection, may the two letters I referred to be made part of the record of the hearing.
Yes.
There'll be exhibits 24, 25 next quarter.
So normally we would take commissioner comments before public comment, but our investigation is ongoing. And since we are continuing this investigation, I think we'll move directly to public comment. Many members of the public have requested comment. I'm so sorry to do this, but because we have this room until 1 o'clock, I will need to limit public comment to 1 minute. I promise you next time I will allot for more time so that I do not cut you off, but this time I have to. So if we could begin with 1 minute intervals of public comment.
When your name is called, please go to the middle of the room. I will be calling the names 3 at a time. Our first speaker will be Riley Perez, followed by Carlos Montes, followed by Leticia Vasquez. Is Riley Perez here with us still? Is Riley Perez here?
My name is Carlos Montes. I'm with the Check the Sheriff Coalition, Center of CSO in Bohai, East LA. I grew up in East LA getting harassed, arrested, and brutalized by the East LA Sheriff Station I know many people in East LA. I graduated from Garfield High School. I have friends, acquaintances that have members of the LA Sheriff's Department at East LA. I have information from two separate instances, two separate conversations that Villanueva joined the Banditos when he was at the East LA Sheriff's Station. These are folks that have friends, relatives within the East LA Sheriff's Station that have given me this information. They're afraid to come forward. They're afraid, obviously, to publicly testify to that because of the terror of East LA Banditos. I'm here to, first of all, thank you for last week passing the motion, asking the Board of Supervisors to put a charter amendment to strengthen oversight over the LA Sheriff's Department. I'm here to say adios Villanueva, buta bandito. We got to get rid of this sheriff, right? He's a bandito, but we need systemic change to the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Leticia Vasquez, followed by Christina E. Vasquez, followed by Jacqueline Venters.
I'm Marco's mom. It's good to be here in presence, not just a phone call. Unfortunately, under the current sheriff, officers are protected and shielded from the process of wrongful misconduct and accountability. It's actually rare during the current regime. You can't continue killing our people and always claiming that you fear for your life. You can't generalize it and you can't say that all are suspects. You can't and you should not be okay with a sheriff dismissing and mocking their victims and think a badge gives you the license to be corrupt. Enough is enough when no improvement is, I'm sorry, I'm nervous, is seen, a change is needed in the leadership. A charter amendment will give the people the power and the strength to be able to change that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
Christina Vasquez, followed by Jacqueline Venters, followed by Julie Martinez.
I am one of the many impacted families represented here this morning. We are, as we have been month after month, here to demand change, to challenge a flawed system, to push for a character amendment so that the sheriff in office will be held accountable. I am here to be the voice of my husband, whose life was brutally taken by negligent and incompetent officers on October 6th of 2019 on our driveway. I am here to remind you of the blood on their hands. The sheriff in office sets the tone for the entire department. If the person in office acts above the law, is it any surprise that officers act the same? Is it shocking the deputy-involved shootings continue to increase? Is it shocking that corruption has leaked into this department? But I mean, this isn't something that is new. This has been going on for generations. It's only being brought to life because people continue to talk about it. Despite retaliation and harassment, so many of us as impacted families have had to endure. How many more lives need to be taken to bring change?
Jacqueline Venters, followed by Julie Martinez, followed by Tamara.
Good morning. I want to thank Lieutenant Waldy and Commander Vera for coming here, brave enough to share. You guys know, my son was shot 5 times in the back by Deputy Gonzalez Souza and a gun planted. So many things. That was April 4th, 2011. We got this far to the Department of Justice, Gascon District Attorney, Federal Bureau of Investigation, but our Department of Justice has dropped the ball. He called me, Investigator Steve Fan called me and told me a lie. I don't know why, but we got to take it further. And this just don't start with the sheriff department. We have people in other departments that's not doing their job. He told me that before they couldn't investigate this deputy anymore because they didn't have enough evidence saying that he planted a gun. My son was shot 5 times in the back. I got a wagon back there that I bought with all the evidence that got us this far with his case, showing that this deputy is corrupt. He's a jump out boy from the Century Station. Asbury and
Julie
Mr.
Martinez.
What's the name left, and they gave me their minutes before they left, so I'll come back and finish.
followed by Tamara, followed by Larry Stewart.
I don't know how I'm going to do this in a minute. I'll try. In February 2020, I read a personal letter to the family from Villanueva in which he claimed that the sheriff department does not compile any data on deputy gangs in 2020. Within 12 hours of my grandson Paul Reyes shooting and murder by a deputy in East LA, several community members approached me at an impromptu memoriam and told me that Deputy Saavedra was a member of the Bandito gang. I was incredulous, had no proof. Since then, several news agencies, national and international, have exposed Deputy Saavedra as a member of the Banditos. Our communities, our kids, our Black, Brown, Indigenous, Asian youth are simply fodder for deputy gangs to earn their position in these deputy gangs. At what point will the COC and Board of Supervisors hold Villanueva accountable? We need the charter amendment. It is painful and disheartening to learn that my grandson's death was simply an activity orchestrated for this deputy to earn his Bandito badge and tattoo. Thank you.
Really want to have everyone be able to have time to comment. So if we could not applaud, if we could just keep going.
I yield my time to Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. Thank you. Since then, we've learned that Deputy Saavedra has a name, Listos. For those of you who don't speak Spanish, Listos means ready. It means ready to shoot. These deputy gangs operate as street gangs, and yet they're not criminalized. These deputy gangs wear badges. They're paid by my taxpayer dollars, which is really, really unfortunate. The COC, as I said earlier, and the Board of Supervisors need to push for the charter amendment. As it stands, Villanueva, as an elected official, there is no accountability. Only through a charter amendment in which the Board of Supervisors will be granted a form of impeachment power will any sheriff, including Villanueva, any future sheriff, be held accountable for criminal gang activity. Let's talk about this. Criminal gang activity who wear badges and who are paid by the taxpayers of the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Stewart, followed by Cynthia Anderson Barker, followed by Richie Sojenko.
My name is Larry Stewart. I just got out of prison for doing 20 years. And I thank God that I'm here today to speak my truth. I got 2 officers out of Compton Court lied and said I threw a weapon when the weapon was found 500 yards away from me by the helicopter. And I'm just going to say to y'all up here, sitting here, y'all can look, but I'm a different breed. When I say I'm a different breed, if change don't come, fire is going to blaze here in these states because people is tired. I'm not going to put my life on the line. They lying on me and they won't give me a deal. They forced me to take a deal. So I'm telling y'all to y'all face, I'm looking at y'all. I just got out from doing 20 years and I've been doing good. If this don't change, the fire is already set. Y'all better change it because ain't nothing going to be at peace. It's real out here. They trying to wipe me out with 3 strikes for something I didn't do. I'm done.
My name is Cynthia Anderson Barker. I'm an attorney with the National Lawyers Guild, but also part of this coalition called Check the Sheriff. And to hear the families here today, after hearing the testimony about the sheriff's conduct and the deputy gangs, and here are the victims. They're right here in this room. So my concern is, number one, my colleagues have sued the sheriff's department, as was mentioned earlier, $50 million involved in deputy gang-related settlements. So what are we going to do? And I love the fact that you're asking, all right, what is the solution? Well, the solution isn't any more blue ribbon commissions. The solution is the discipline and firing and taking out that authority from the sheriff's department to a separate entity. And also, of course, impeaching and the authority to impeach and recall for cause. So before we start any more blue ribbon commissions and 5 more years pass and more people die, let's take action now. Thank you very much.
Richie Sojenko, followed by Raquel Durfee, followed by Hal Steinberg.
How's it going, Commission? So I'm Chisojenko. I'm an organizer with the People City Council and also a member of the Check the Sheriff Coalition. I've been at the Vargas family house when the deputies have come over and harassed and assaulted family members. That's a daily occurrence for the Vargas family. Much like the Royal family and Marco Vasquez's family, you have people in this room, and I know commissioners yourself, and I know Max Huntsman has been subjected to harassment and retaliation from LASD. Myself, Alex Villanueva, is running a Facebook campaign ad against me, and I'm a private citizen. I'm not running for office. And he's mad because work that the families and the Check the Sheriff Coalition is doing to expose LASD. I'm here to recommend the charter amendment, but LASD won't stop killing Black and brown people until they're abolished. Dismantle and disband LASD.
Raquel Durkee, followed by Hal Steinberg, followed by Michelle Infante.
Good afternoon. My name is Raquel Durfler, and I'm here today on behalf of Cancel the Contract, AV. The existence of deputy gangs, coupled with the fact that the Palmdale and Lancaster Sheriff Stations have been under a consent decree with the Department of Justice since 2015, has led to untold suffering for our brown and Black communities. Villanueva and LSA, the Sheriff's Department, which includes the two deputy gangs, the Cowboys and the Rattlesnakes, are the single greatest threat to the civil liberties, lives, and safety to the communities of color in the Antelope Valley. I'm here today to ask that this body meets with Cancel the Contract to discuss really how do we make sure that the sheriff comes into compliance with that consent decree. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Hal Steinberg, followed by Michelle Infante.
Hi, my name is Hal Steinberg. I'm also with Cancel the Contract in the Antelope Valley. I think our community in the Antelope Valley is often forgotten about also in the county as one of the most difficult places in the area. So there are 3 deputies who I know of who are on the streets right now who have issues. One is a deputy who did not respond to a life and death issue and let one of our members die. Another deputy who has also a civil rights lawsuit against him currently on the streets, and a third deputy who body slammed the student at Lancaster High School that we all know about. This is a problem of impunity that goes beyond just the hiring and firing of deputy gangs. It goes to the roots of this department. And it's been said before, commissions, investigations, long-standing things that have been known for 50 years, as the Inspector General himself stated, go far beyond any of those things. So actions need to be taken. And due process blocks the process constantly of these people on our streets. They need to be taken off of our streets immediately.
Michelle Infante, followed by Ron Dell, followed by Isaac Asbury.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Michelle Infante. I'm with Dignity and Power Now. I've been working for 8 years directly impacted families. It's not just that we have someone who has deputy gangs here, and that's what they are. They're deputy gangs. They're not subgroups. What we have here is someone who lies on an investigation report, and then that lie is perpetuated by the coroner's office. And then it continues down the line. And then every family that's here that deserves millions of dollars, millions, not 2, not 3, not 5, millions of dollars. This lady over here, she's trying to fight for her son. What she has on paper is probably all false accusations, character assassination. And she has to take that to a court of law and try to explain the lies that are on here. This is crazy nonsense. Our organization is saving money and trying to fund to help these families with mental health services. The least you can do is take the charter amendment and push it through with the County Board of Supervisors at the very least.
Ron Dell, followed by Isaac Asbury, followed by Andres Kwan.
Rondell and Isaac Asbury gave me their time. But Mr. Bonner and Mr. Huntsman, thank you guys. Mr. Bonner, I remember when you first submitted the resolution for the recall or resignation of the sheriff, and you got the ball rolling. We're here now, but it's not stopping right here because I'm here with the Department of Justice, and this investigator just did something that's illegal. He lied to me. He lied to me and told me that these deputies had to have tell on their fellow deputies saying that they seen him with a gun or they had to have a witness. I've been in court from the beginning, April 4th to I'm standing here right now. I never stopped fighting for my son, but what he did was untrue. And he didn't know the next day I met with Gascon, and he said that wasn't true either. I requested a letter and told him that he wanted the letter that they sent. They have failed to send me anything stating that they have to tell on somebody. All these deputies got up there and testified that they never seen a gun. One of them even said he don't even know why his deputies shot. These things have to stop because we as civilians, we seen what he did to Mr. Huntsman over here. Disrespected the subpoenas. Mr. Huntsman, you sent 3 letters over to the sheriff department for my son for investigation. They have failed to do anything. One of the sergeants over there told me he wasn't giving me nothing. They wasn't investigating anything to go to the Department of Justice. Look what the Department of Justice just did. This is a lie. This is not true. We have seen people go to jail for no weapons been found, but my son was shot 5 times in the back. You guys, I don't know if y'all got that video, but I got a video that LA Times and KPCC sued the sheriff department in court because I have Mr. Isaac's time.
Thank you.
But they sued him. They sued, yeah, I have the time. They sued in court.
No, there's,
Ma'am, you were given 2 minutes.
I'm sorry.
I have another minute for
Yes,
Ron.
you were given
Isaac has-
both of the minutes,
Two.
ma'am.
Oh, yeah.
I give you 2 for your absent friends.
Andres Juan, followed by Valerie Vargas, followed by Stephanie Luna.
Andres Juan, ACLU, check the sheriff. Today, more information kept in the dark by the sheriff and county council came to light. We heard about exclusion, retaliation, shot callers, beatings, shootings, rampant civil rights violations, 998 inking parties, work slowdowns, abuse of power, cover-ups and secrecy, impunity. To sum it up, as the lieutenant said, the sheriff has sacrificed public safety for power. But here's the thing, we've known of all this. How many more investigations of blue ribbon commissions before the powers that be do something about it? No, it's past time for us to radically overhaul the department, as the LA Times editorial board put it. And I'm not talking about just policy banning deputy gangs, which will be meaningless when it has to be implemented by a sheriff who gaslights the public on the issue and minimizes it. We thank the commission for just voting to support our community recommendation for a charter amendment to finally establish meaningful checks and balances, and we urge the supervisor to take this important step. Our community, especially families devastated by sheriff violence, are here. Can you please stand? Please stand.
Thank you, Andres.
This is just a glimpse of all the families and communities devastated by sheriff violence.
Valerie Vargas, followed by Stephanie Luna, followed by our last speaker, Janae Rea.
Good morning, all. Waited a long time to be here in person, about 2 years. It's gonna take a lot to process what we heard today during the testimonies, but like this gentleman had said over here, I think he had just came out of prison for 20 years, where he has said that the fire has been lit. The fire has been lit for about past 4 years, and it just seems like every year I get angrier and angrier. So I want to say thank you for getting the ball rolling on the charter amendment, but we really do need it to be pushed to the board of supervisors. I really don't want to be here. I waste my time like calling in from work and complaining to you guys about what the LASD does, and it's not just LASD, but it's the sheriff himself who keeps like antagonizing my family. The only thing that I could think of is right now is just implementing the charter amendment and somehow finding some way to protect the families, because you have whistleblowers here who are protected by the law, but we as civilians, there's no protection for us. Thank you.
Stephanie Luna, followed by Janae Rea.
Yeah, hello. Following what my sister said, we're the family of Anthony Vargas. I mean, you guys already know the story that happened with my nephew. He was killed by two Bandito prospects. Just sitting here listening to the testimony of the officer and hearing how he said that he feared for the life of him and his family, I can tell you that that's something that we deal with on a daily basis. And that's because we face harassment and intimidation from not just the sheriff's department, not just the sheriffs involved in my nephew's murder, but from Alex Villanueva himself. It's a big deal being here today, having an entire discussion on deputy gangs, because a few years ago, nobody wanted to talk about this. This was something that everybody stood away from. So thank you to the commission for, being so willing and so ready and so able to challenge Alex, because let me tell you, he doesn't like to be challenged, and we're here for it. The fact that my nephew's not here no more means that we're going to be here for the rest of our life fighting not just Villanueva himself, but the sheriff's department. And that's why it's important to get the charter amendment on the ballot, because we know that this isn't just about Villanueva. It's going to be about anyone that comes in after his leadership. Thank you.
Hello, I'm the sister of Paul Rao, who was 18 years old when he was murdered in 2019 by an active deputy gang member, Hector Cerveja, called Little East in the East Los Angeles Third Station, who is still on duty. I want to take a moment and say how big the deputy gangs take part in the officer-involved killings within the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Alex Villanueva is the head of it all. One moment there's no gangs, and then the next he's removing them from the stations. There's Banditos, Compton Executors, Jump Out Boys, 3,000 Boys, Grim Reapers, Regulators, and plenty more deputy gangs that are only out to kill and harass our community members. Other than protect and serve, we take part and try to fight for our loved ones against these deputy gangs, but it feels as if we get no progress with Alex Villanueva being sheriff and making it worse, not helping. Rather to harass families in different aspects, making us more of a target than we already are. These deputies get tattoos as an accomplishment other than getting any discipline. There's proof and facts. Alex can hide it all he wants, but the whole LASD are active deputy gang members. Thank you.
Okay, I really appreciate the impacted families making statements, and I want to thank you for your patience. I'll make sure there's plenty of time to speak next special hearing. This concludes the COC's first special hearings on alleged deputy gangs. This presentation, Mr. Dexler, gives everybody in this room, and I hope the Sheriff's Department, a lot to think about. I want to thank Loyola Law School for donating this venue and substantial tech assistance to make this hearing happen. And I also want to thank our executive director and our great COC staff for attending to every detail. You can't imagine how much went into this hearing to make sure this actually happened.
Thank you.
After we consult with Mr. Deichler, the COC will release additional information about the next special hearing on deputy gangs. So look for it on our website.
Thank you.
Thank you.